What is going on? Putting Mom in a storage shed. Oh, that. I just got tired of taking care of her. I can't help it, okay? What? Are you kidding me? When I went to my mother-in-law's house to take her to the hot springs, we found her trembling in the storage shed in a pitiful state. I was speechless at my sister-in-law's inhumane actions and the appalling conditions she had subjected my mother-in-law to. Little did I know that divine retribution was about to befall my sister-in-law. I am a 46-year-old housewife, and my husband is also 46. We have a son who recently moved out to attend college in another state. I had expected him to attend a local university and live with us for a few more years, even after starting his career. However, children often leave the nest earlier than their parents anticipate. Unexpectedly, my husband and I found ourselves with more free time, just the two of us. How about we go on a spa vacation this long weekend? My husband suggested. Lately, he's been coming home early, likely due to recent changes in the work culture. He also seems to be going out for drinks a lot less. That sounds wonderful, I replied. Our first trip alone since our honeymoon, right? Not just vacations. I can't even remember the last time we went out to eat, just the two of us. It's been that long. Yeah, but how about inviting your mom this time? I suggested, surprising my husband. Although we're both in our 40s and still physically capable of taking care of my mother-in-law during the trip, we've declined her invitations multiple times since our son started grade school, often using parenting as an excuse. My husband had also been declining due to work commitments. Without opportunities like this, we might grow distant from her. After I explained my reasons, my husband agreed. My mother-in-law currently lives with my sister-in-law and her husband, so we decided to reach out to her. I thought it might be better handled between women, so I called my sister-in-law. Perfect timing, she said. We were about to go on a trip and didn't know what to do with Mom. Luckily, I found someone who can take care of her. We were on speakerphone because my husband wanted to speak to his mother. When my sister-in-law made her self-centered comment, he was livid. Hey, what the hell do you mean by that? He demanded. Oh, would you look at the time? We're going to miss our flight. My sister-in-law brushed off his concern, emphasizing her own busyness and abruptly ending the call. What the hell is my sister doing? Is Mom okay with her acting like that? My husband fumed. The excitement of reuniting with his mother after so long was overshadowed by growing anxiety. We need to go there right now, he declared urgently. The in-laws' house is situated in the same city, though our neighborhood is a newly developed area that has expanded over the last 2 decades. In contrast, the vicinity around their home still boasts houses dating back to the 1920s. Although my sister-in-law and her husband moved in with my mother-in-law and renovated the house, it retains an old-world charm. After a 20-minute drive, we arrived at the in-laws' house. We could see the roof, but the front door was locked, and our attempts to call and knock went unanswered. I tried reaching Lisa to inquire about a spare key, but couldn't get through. Our anxiety grew as we frantically searched around the mailbox, under plant pots, and in other possible spots for a hidden key. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure. John was exploring nearby when he also noticed it. Could she be in here? He murmured, peering into the shed. Then he shouted in shock. I hurried over and found my mother-in-law wrapped in cardboard, shivering uncontrollably. Mom, I exclaimed. She was barely dressed, barefoot, with disheveled hair and a pale face. Her skin looked dry, and there was an unsettling odor. Her appearance was less concerning than her well-being. How long had she been left in this state? We need to warm her up quickly. I know, damn it. Should we break the window to get in? John suggested urgently. Hold on, what about the backyard window? It might be open, I proposed. The backyard was shielded from the street, offering a chance that they might have forgotten to secure it. John hurried over and, as I had hoped, found the window unlocked. He entered the house, unlocked the front door, and brought his mother inside. From then on, we operated with seamless coordination, like a well-rehearsed team. I warmed the room while John wrapped her in blankets. I changed her clothes while he prepared the bath. As I bathed her, he readied the bed, and together we settled her in. Oh, it's so warm. It's like heaven, his mother murmured, closing her eyes as she seemed to drift off to sleep. Your mom should have a family doctor at her age, right? I suggested, contemplating the urgency of the situation. We needed medical assistance but couldn't locate her room. As I searched for a change of clothes for her, I couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. It became evident we were facing a life-threatening scenario, prompting me to borrow clothes from Lisa. Despite her extensive wardrobe, none of the clothes seemed suitable for my mother-in-law. We scored for her insurance card and prescription information to no avail, leading us to search online for a doctor who could conduct a home visit. Once secured, John promptly alerted the authorities. Upon arrival, the doctor emphasized the critical timing of our intervention. Delay could have been disastrous, especially given the severe winter conditions and the potential for snow in the mountains. The examination revealed signs of malnutrition and dehydration from severely limited food and water intake. Additionally, her neglected living conditions had caused a distressing skin rash and even lice infestation, a shocking development in modern times. The doctor prescribed medications and urged us to arrange a follow-up with her regular family doctor as soon as possible. As we searched for her insurance card and essential items, we came across the contact details for the caregiving service that had been responsible for her well-being. Luckily, it was still saved in the home phone's contacts. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, we reached out to understand what had transpired during the period we were preoccupied with our own lives. After contacting the service, we learned that Lisa had abruptly terminated the contract without prior notice, leaving them unable to intervene further. The caregiver expressed genuine concern for my mother-in-law, mentioning occasional bruises that hinted at possible domestic abuse. They had attempted to address this delicate issue with Lisa, but she had evaded their inquiries. Years of daily abuse? Was my mother enduring this? John exclaimed angrily. Damn it. Yes, we were overwhelmed when our first child arrived, but that doesn't justify neglecting my mother's welfare. I deeply regretted interpreting my mother-in-law's words. It's okay, it's okay. As a mother, it's natural that your child comes first, as mere reassurance. Looking back, our frequent invitations for us to visit may have been cries for help, a plea to escape Lisa's mistreatment. Voicing my regret, I confessed to my husband, who reassured me, it's not your fault. I'm equally responsible, if not more so. Now, only Lisa and her husband hold the truth. We won't know for sure until we hear it from them, but Lisa is capable of such actions without remorse. Anticipating potential disputes over what was said or omitted, we decided to record all our future phone conversations. Lisa reluctantly answered the phone, sounding annoyed to be interrupted during her vacation. However, when my husband raised his voice, she begrudgingly began to speak, her tone flat and detached. I listened intently to the conversation on speakerphone. My mother's forgetfulness was really starting to grate on my nerves. I got so frustrated and just gave her a little shove, but she happened to be standing at the top of the stairs. She tumbled down like a sack of potatoes. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Lisa was referring to her own mother as a sack of potatoes, and her tone suggested she found it somewhat amusing. Then she couldn't get up on her own. I knew it was serious, but I was just so tired of dealing with everything, so I decided to put her in the shed. Lisa continued casually. You know how you store things you don't need or can't use in the shed? It's like that, she added, laughing. It was clear that Lisa was treating her own mother like an object, dismissing her as useless despite the fact that she had given birth to her and raised her. The selfishness of her attitude made me feel physically ill. The caregiver doesn't know about this, so it's fine. Just make sure nothing unnecessary happens, okay? It dawned on me then that Lisa understood the severity of the situation after she pushed her mother down the stairs, which led her to abruptly cancel the caregiving services. She spoke callously, saying things like, as long as she has water, she'll be fine for a week, and if she starts wandering around, we can just tie her up. It was horrifying and utterly unbearable to hear. Oh, and you guys should cooperate too. If things keep going like this, she's going to die from weakness. If she does pass peacefully, I'm considering sharing some of the inheritance with you guys. Not a bad deal, right? Lisa's tone conveyed a chilling belief in her flawless plan, punctuated by an unsettling laugh. Her proposal defied all reason and veered into madness. Listening to Lisa, I felt a deep unease as though she herself were a dangerous weapon. Fear gripped me and I couldn't stop shaking. Meanwhile, my husband handled the situation calmly, allowing Lisa to explain without immediate objection, merely nodding along. He ambiguously responded to her plea for cooperation, neither fully accepting nor rejecting it. His strategy was to lower her defenses and encourage her to return home. Unbeknownst to Lisa, the police we had alerted had already arrived at her location and were monitoring our phone conversations. They instructed us to extract as much information as possible from her and to prevent her from escaping by feigning agreement with her plans. John, my husband, seemed poised to denounce and condemn Lisa's actions outright. I couldn't bear to witness the anguish on his face again, the strain of suppressing his emotions while listening to Lisa. I fervently hoped we would soon emerge from this sorrowful ordeal. Unaware of our collaboration with the police, Lisa and her husband enjoyed their vacation to the fullest. Exactly 1 week after we discovered their mistreatment of my mother-in-law, they returned home. As Lisa spoke about her mother, I casually inquired about their return schedule. Little did they know, the police were waiting to apprehend them upon their arrival. An arrest warrant had already been issued, and they were taken into custody as soon as the document was presented. What's going on? You're my own brother, selling out your sister to the cops? What a lowlife you are. And you cops, watch where you're touching me. I'll sue you, mark my words. Lisa, a middle-aged woman, spat out her words like a washed-up thug. John regarded his sister with a mixture of disdain and disappointment. The real lowlife here is you, John retorted calmly. Hey officer, that guy, my brother, he's a sly fox, always been a liar with a honeyed voice, Lisa continued, attempting to smear my husband's reputation. She then boldly asserted, Mom has been suffering from dementia for years. No matter how many times I explain it, she insists the storage shed is her home. Isn't it better to let her do as she pleases? Even doctors say that yelling at dementia patients only makes things worse. But we already had Lisa's confession recorded. When John played back the phone conversation, Lisa and her husband paled visibly and sank to the ground. From now on, you'll be behind bars. We've already completed the necessary procedures while you were away. Don't act so superior, dumping the responsibility of that helpless old woman on us. You have no right. You insisted on remaining childless so you could care for our aging parents instead. It was you, Lisa, who asked us to forfeit our share of the inheritance. My husband said calmly. It seemed this was an arrangement they had made before John and I were married. You were the one who broke the pact first. If it was too much for you, you could have told me. That would have been fine with me, John said with a choked voice, expressing his readiness to care for his parents. Lisa's initial plan was to care for her mother in exchange for claiming all of the inheritance. However, her mother unexpectedly remained resilient and lived longer than expected. Unable to tolerate this, Lisa devised a plan to make her mother's passing appear natural due to frailty. As for the ownership of the family home, it remained in their mother's name since their father's death. Fortunately, the property was not in Lisa's name. Therefore, we decided to demolish the deteriorated family home and convert it into an empty lot. We plan to sell the lot later. The demolition date has already been set, so please remove your personal belongings as soon as possible. You must be joking. I'm under arrest, you idiot. How am I supposed to do that? We've rented a storage unit for 3 years to store your belongings. It will be paid for from your savings, John informed Lisa. What? Who gave you the right to make decisions on your own? You used to be a crybaby, always running to your big sister. Now suddenly you've grown a spine. Lisa raged, incensed that John had taken charge of her finances. Despite her protests, John remained composed. He added that if the lease couldn't be extended after 3 years, they had the right to dispose of the contents. Lisa could only stare in disbelief, unable to argue. It was a clear victory for us. The police intervened, declaring that enough had been said. They escorted Lisa and her husband into a waiting police car. Resisting until the last moment, they were carried away like uncooperative luggage. In the days that followed, the demolition of our parents' house proceeded smoothly. It turned out that my mother-in-law had not been suffering from dementia after all. Her forgetfulness was simply a part of aging, a common experience that doesn't typically inconvenience others. I too sometimes forget what I was about to do, only to recall it later. Similarly, my mother-in-law was like that. Thanks to her, Lisa had no legal grounds to contest the decision to demolish the house, as my mother-in-law was the rightful owner. Since Lisa and her husband didn't retrieve their belongings from the house, we proceeded with the demolition, leaving their possessions inside. Now they are incarcerated. It appeared they were unaware they could have preserved their belongings by making appropriate arrangements such as hiring a company to move them with the assistance of a court-appointed attorney. Their actions became widely known after being featured on television in a segment titled True Stories That Seem Unbelievable, likening their behavior to a modern-day abandonment of elders. Subsequently, Lisa and her husband were charged with elder abuse and neglect by the authorities responsible for their protection. They were found guilty and are likely to face a significant period of incarceration. We successfully sold the vacant plot for a substantial sum. In addition, we decided to sell our current house, located in a highly sought-after area, which fetched a good price even as a used property. With these funds, we built a new home for the three of us, including my mother-in-law, in a location where we envision spending our elderly years comfortably. The new house is single-story and designed to be elderly-friendly, situated in a town with convenient bus services and excellent care facilities. Since moving, my mother-in-law has shown remarkable improvement in her health. She walks with a straight posture and faithfully performs her daily morning exercises. She now enjoys gardening with me, tending to our vegetable patch every day. Soon, we'll be enjoying the fruits of our labor together at the dinner table.
The moment I stepped through the front door, my heart sank. There stood Edna, my mother-in-law, with her suitcases packed and a smug look on her face. I knew this day would come, but I never expected it to be so soon. "Naomi, your worthless existence is over. Neil doesn't need a useless wife who claims to work. From now on, I'll take care of my son," Edna declared, her voice dripping with disdain. I felt the anger rising within me. "This is my home too, and I work hard every day, Edna. You can't just—" She cut me off, thrusting a stack of papers into my hands. "Don't lie. Sign these papers and leave while I make this place worthy of my family." My eyes widened as I realized what I was holding. Divorce papers, supposedly signed by Neil. The betrayal stung like 1,000 needles, piercing my heart. How could he do this to me after all these years? I looked up at Edna, her eyes gleaming with triumph. She had always resented me, viewing me as an obstacle to her son's success. Now she had finally found a way to get rid of me. But I refused to let her see me crumble. With a steady hand, I signed the papers, my signature a declaration of my resolve. I would not let this defeat me. I would start anew, free from the toxicity that had plagued my life for far too long. As I gathered my belongings, memories of happier times flooded my mind. Neil and I had once been so in love, supporting each other's dreams and ambitions. He had encouraged my freelance writing career, and I had been his rock as he pursued his own passions. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. Neil's writing career stagnated, and he began to indulge his parents' delusions of grandeur. The loving husband I once knew had become a stranger, a mere puppet in his family's twisted play. I pushed the memories aside, focusing on the present. I had to find a new place to live, to rebuild my life on my own terms. It wouldn't be easy, but I knew I had the strength within me to overcome this challenge. As I stepped out of the house, I caught a glimpse of Edna's smug smile. She thought she had won, but little did she know that this was just the beginning of my journey. I would prove to her, to Neil, and to myself that I was more than just a useless wife. With each step, I felt a newfound sense of purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it head-on. I had spent too many years living in the shadows of others' expectations. Now, it was time for me to reclaim my life and find the happiness I deserved. As I walked away from the house that had once been my home, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. But I knew that this was not the end, but rather the start of a new chapter. A chapter where I would be the author of my own story, free from the chains of the past. With a deep breath, I stepped into the unknown, ready to embrace the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead. This was my time to shine, and nothing, not even Edna's cruelty or Neil's betrayal, could stop me now. As I settled into the driver's seat of my car, the weight of the past few hours crashed down on me. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white as I fought back the tears that threatened to spill. How had it come to this? How had the love Neil and I once shared turned into such a bitter, twisted mess? Memories of our early days together flooded my mind. I remembered the way Neil's eyes sparkled when he talked about his writing, the passion in his voice as he shared his dreams with me. I had been his biggest supporter, encouraging him to pursue his craft while I worked tirelessly to build my own freelance career. We had been a team, a partnership built on love and mutual respect. But somewhere along the way, things had changed. Neil's writing career had stagnated, and he had become increasingly distant, spending more and more time trying to please his parents. I had tried to be understanding, to be supportive, but Edna's constant meddling and Neil's growing resentment had taken their toll. The once loving husband I knew had become a stranger, a shell of the man I had fallen in love with. As I drove through the familiar streets of our neighborhood, I couldn't help but wonder what had gone wrong. Had I not been enough? Had I not loved him enough, supported him enough? But deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't about me. It was about Neil's inability to stand up to his parents, to assert himself, and fight for our marriage. He had chosen to indulge their delusions, to prioritize their expectations over our relationship. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had to move on, to find a new place to live and start over. I couldn't continue to live in a house where I was constantly belittled and undermined, where my own husband had betrayed me so deeply. I pulled into the parking lot of a local coffee shop, needing a moment to gather my thoughts. As I sat there, sipping on a steaming cup of coffee, I felt a newfound sense of determination wash over me. I would not let this defeat me. I would rise above the pain and the betrayal, and I would build a new life for myself. I pulled out my phone and started searching for apartments in the area. It wouldn't be easy, starting over at my age, but I knew I had the strength within me to do it. I had spent too many years living in the shadows of others' expectations. It was time for me to step into the light and reclaim my life. As I scrolled through the listings, a sense of excitement began to build within me. This was my chance to start fresh, to create a home that was truly my own, a place where I could be myself, free from the constant judgment and criticism of my in-laws. I knew there would be challenges ahead. I would have to face the reality of Neil's betrayal and the disdain of his family. But I was ready. I had spent too many years silently enduring their abuse, and I refused to do it any longer. With a newfound sense of purpose, I finished my coffee and headed back to the car. I had a lot of work ahead of me, but I was ready to face it head on. This was my time to shine, to prove to myself and to the world that I was more than just a useless wife. As I drove away from the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I was ready to embrace the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead, to write the next chapter of my life on my own terms. The days following my departure from the house I once called home were a whirlwind of emotions. I threw myself into my work, determined to prove to myself and everyone else that I was more than just a useless wife. But even as I poured my heart and soul into my freelance projects, I couldn't escape the constant barrage of insults and passive-aggressive behavior from Edna and Neil. Every family gathering became a battlefield, with Edna taking every opportunity to publicly humiliate me. She would make snide comments about my work, my appearance, and my supposed lack of contribution to the family. Neil, ever the dutiful son, would sit silently by, never once coming to my defense. I remember one particularly painful incident at a family dinner. Edna had invited everyone over to celebrate Neil's supposed writing success, and I had reluctantly agreed to attend. As we sat around the table, Edna began to regale the family with tales of Neil's literary prowess, painting him as a rising star in the publishing world. I knew it was all a lie, but I bit my tongue, not wanting to cause a scene. But Edna wasn't content to simply praise her son. She turned to me, a cruel smile playing on her lips, and said, "And what about you, Naomi? What have you accomplished lately? Still playing at being a writer?" The table fell silent, and I felt all eyes on me. I wanted to scream, to tell them all the truth about Neil's failures and Edna's manipulation, but I remained stoically silent, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I excused myself from the table and stepped outside, taking deep breaths to calm my racing heart. It was in that moment that I realized I couldn't continue to live this way. I had to leave, to find a way out of this toxic environment before it destroyed me completely. Later that evening, I found myself confiding in my daughter, Clara. She had always been my rock, my confidante, and I knew I could trust her with my deepest fears and doubts. As we sat together on the couch, I poured out my heart to her, telling her about the constant insults, the passive-aggressive behavior, and the suffocating control Edna had over our lives. Clara listened patiently, her eyes filled with concern and love. When I finished, she took my hand in hers and said, "Mom, you deserve so much better than this. You are a strong, talented, and amazing woman, and you don't need to put up with their abuse any longer." Her words hit me like a lightning bolt, and I felt a sudden surge of clarity wash over me. She was right. I had spent too many years silently enduring their mistreatment, and it was time for me to take a stand. I had to value myself, to recognize my own worth, and to prepare for a life without Neil and his toxic family. With Clara's encouragement ringing in my ears, I began to make plans. I started secretly searching for apartments, determined to find a place where I could start fresh and rebuild my life on my own terms. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face the challenges head-on. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. I knew that leaving Neil and his family would be painful, but I also knew that it was necessary. I had to prioritize my own well-being, to reclaim the respect and autonomy that had been stripped away from me for so long. With a newfound sense of purpose, I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep, dreaming of a future where I was free from the chains of my past, ready to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. With newfound determination, I began to put my plan into action. I started covertly searching for apartments, scouring online listings, and making discreet calls to potential landlords. I knew I had to be careful, as any hint of my intentions would surely be met with swift retribution from Edna and Neil. As I searched, I also began to discreetly pack my belongings. I started with small, inconspicuous items. A few books here, a piece of jewelry there. I tucked them away in hidden corners of the house, slowly building a secret stash of my most treasured possessions. But even as I worked towards my escape, the tension at home continued to escalate. Neil, ever the dutiful son, seemed to be under increasing pressure from his parents to maintain the illusion of his success. He began to siphon money from our joint accounts, claiming it was for shared expenses, but I knew better. I remember one particularly heated argument we had over finances. I had confronted him about the missing money, demanding to know where it had gone. He had the audacity to look me in the eye and lie, claiming it was for a business investment that would pay off tenfold. I saw right through his deceit, and I felt a surge of anger course through my veins. How dare he continue to manipulate and deceive me, even as I was planning my escape from this toxic environment? But I refused to let my anger consume me. Instead, I channeled it into a quiet, steely resolve. I would not let Neil or his family break me. I would regain the respect and autonomy that had been stripped away from me, no matter the cost. As the days turned into weeks, I continued to search for my new home in secret. I attended apartment viewings under the guise of running errands, always careful to cover my tracks. I knew that if Edna or Neil caught wind of my plans, they would stop at nothing to keep me under their control. Finally, after weeks of searching, I found the perfect place. It was a small, cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood, far from the suffocating influence of my in-laws. I signed the lease with a sense of triumph, knowing that I was one step closer to my freedom. But even as I celebrated this small victory, I knew that the hardest part was yet to come. I had to find a way to leave without triggering a prolonged fight with Edna and Neil. I knew they would not let me go easily, and I had to be strategic in my departure. That's when fate seemed to intervene. Edna, in her never-ending quest to control every aspect of our lives, began to pressure me to sign the divorce papers once again. She cornered me one evening, thrusting the papers in my face and demanding that I end this farce of a marriage once and for all. In that moment, I saw my opportunity. I agreed to sign the papers, but on one condition, that I be allowed to leave immediately, without any further interference from her or Neil. Edna, so eager to be rid of me, readily agreed. And so, with a sense of both relief and trepidation, I signed my name on the dotted line. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders, knowing that I was finally free from the legal bonds that had tied me to Neil and his family for so long. But even as I celebrated this small victory, I knew that the real challenge lay ahead. I had to gather my belongings and make my escape before Edna or Neil could change their minds. I had to be strong, to rely on the quiet strength that had sustained me through all these years of silent battles. With a deep breath, I began to pack my bags, ready to embark on the next chapter of my life. A chapter filled with uncertainty, yes, but also with the promise of a brighter future, free from the chains of my past. The day I moved into my new apartment was a day I will never forget. As I stepped over the threshold, a wave of relief washed over me, so powerful that it nearly brought me to my knees. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again, like the weight of the world had been lifted from my shoulders. I took a moment to simply stand there, taking in my new surroundings. The apartment was small, but it was mine. Every inch of it represented a new beginning, a chance to start over and rebuild my life on my own terms. As I began to unpack my belongings, I felt a newfound burst of creativity coursing through my veins. Ideas for new writing projects flooded my mind, and I found myself itching to sit down at my desk and put pen to paper. It was as if the act of leaving behind the toxic environment of my old life had unlocked something within me, something that had been dormant for far too long. Over the next few days, I threw myself into my work with a passion I hadn't felt in years. I wrote for hours on end, pouring my heart and soul into every word. I took breaks only to eat, sleep, and occasionally chat with my new neighbor, Grace, who had quickly become a source of support and friendship. Grace was a kind, empathetic woman who seemed to understand the struggles I was going through without me even having to say a word. She would often invite me over for tea and conversation, and I found myself opening up to her in ways I never had with anyone before. As I settled into my new life, I began to rediscover the joy of living independently. I relished the freedom to make my own choices, to come and go as I pleased without fear of judgment or criticism. I took long walks in the park, explored new cafes and bookstores, and even started attending a weekly writing group at the local library. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly living, rather than simply existing. I was no longer defined by my role as Neil's wife or Edna's punching bag. I was Naomi, a strong, capable woman with a bright future ahead of her. But even as I reveled in my newfound independence, I couldn't shake the feeling that the other shoe was about to drop. I had spent so many years living under the oppressive thumb of my in-laws that a part of me was still waiting for them to come barging back into my life, demanding that I return to my old ways. And then, 3 days into my fresh start, the phone rang. I picked it up, expecting it to be Clara, or perhaps a new client. But the voice on the other end of the line made my blood run cold. It was Neil, and he was in a panic. He spoke rapidly, his words tumbling over each other in a frantic jumble. From what I could gather, his family was in the midst of a financial crisis, and the carefully crafted facade of his success had come crashing down around them. I listened in stunned silence as he begged me to come back, to help him pick up the pieces of the life he had so carelessly shattered. But even as a part of me ached for the man I had once loved, I knew that I could never go back to that life. I had worked too hard, come too far, to let myself be dragged back into the darkness. With a heavy heart, I told Neil that I couldn't help him, that he needed to face the consequences of his actions on his own. And then, with a sense of finality, I hung up the phone, severing the last tie to my old life. As I sat there in the silence of my new apartment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but I also knew that I had the strength within me to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I was ready to embrace my new life, to chase my dreams, and build a future filled with love, laughter, and endless possibility. The days following Neil's frantic phone call were a whirlwind of emotions. I tried to focus on my work, to lose myself in the joy of writing and the comfort of my new life, but his words kept echoing in my mind, refusing to be silenced. It wasn't until a week later that I learned the full extent of the crisis that had befallen my former family. Grace, my ever-vigilant neighbor, had heard through the grapevine that Neil's parents had lost everything. They had quit their jobs, believing in the fiction of their son's success, and now found themselves destitute and desperate. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for them, despite all the pain they had caused me over the years. To have your entire world come crashing down around you, to realize that the life you had built was nothing more than a house of cards. I couldn't imagine the devastation they must have felt. But even as I grappled with these conflicting emotions, the phone calls from Neil continued. Each time, his voice grew more desperate, more unhinged. He begged me to come back, to help him pick up the pieces of the life he had so carelessly shattered. "Naomi, they think I'm a successful writer," he pleaded, his voice cracking with emotion. "They won't stop until you come back." I felt my resolve wavering, the old habits of a lifetime threatening to pull me back into the darkness. But then I remembered all the pain and humiliation I had endured at the hands of Neil and his family, all the years I had spent silently suffering under their oppressive rule. "I won't be part of your lies anymore," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "You need to face the consequences of your actions." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, broken only by the sound of Neil's ragged breathing. And then, with a click, the call disconnected, leaving me alone with my thoughts once more. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work with renewed vigor. I wrote like a woman possessed, pouring all of my pain and anger and hope onto the page. I attended writing workshops and networking events, determined to build a new life for myself, one that was entirely my own. And slowly but surely I began to heal. The wounds of the past would always be with me, but they no longer defined me. I was no longer Naomi the victim, Naomi the punching bag. I was Naomi the survivor, Naomi the thriver. But even as I embraced this new chapter of my life, I couldn't help but wonder about Neil and his family. What had become of them in the wake of their own destruction? Had they found a way to pick up the pieces, to start anew? It wasn't until months later that I learned the truth. Grace, ever the gossip, had heard through a friend of a friend that Neil and his parents had moved into a small, run-down apartment on the outskirts of town. They were barely scraping by, their once proud lives reduced to a shambles. I felt a strange sense of vindication at the news, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. But even as I reveled in this small victory, I knew that I could never truly take pleasure in their downfall. For me, the true revenge was in living well, in building a life that was entirely my own. And so, with a sense of peace and purpose, I cut off all ties to my old life, embracing the freedom and independence that I had fought so hard to achieve. As I sat at my desk, surrounded by the trappings of my new life, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over me. I had confronted the demons of my past and emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. And now, with the world at my feet and the future stretching out before me, I knew that anything was possible. As the months passed, I settled into my new life with a sense of peace and contentment that I hadn't felt in years. My writing flourished, and I found myself surrounded by a growing circle of friends and colleagues who appreciated me for who I was, rather than what I could do for them. But even as I reveled in my newfound freedom, I couldn't help but wonder about Neil and his family. What had become of them in the wake of their own destruction? Had they found a way to rebuild their lives, or were they still struggling to pick up the pieces? It wasn't until I ran into Grace at the local market that I finally got some answers. She pulled me aside, her eyes wide with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "You'll never guess what I heard," she whispered conspiratorially. "Apparently, Neil and his parents have moved into a tiny apartment on the other side of town. They're barely scraping by, and the whole neighborhood is talking about it." I felt a strange sense of vindication wash over me, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. But even as I processed this news, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sympathy for them. "I heard that Edna and Tom are constantly fighting," Grace continued, her voice lowering even further. "And Neil, well, let's just say he's not handling the pressure very well." I nodded, unsurprised by this revelation. Neil had always been weak-willed, easily swayed by the opinions of others. It was no wonder that he was struggling to cope with the weight of his own lies. Over the next few weeks, I found myself thinking more and more about my former family. I couldn't help but wonder what they were going through, how they were coping with the reality of their own downfall. But even as I grappled with these conflicting emotions, I knew that I couldn't let myself get pulled back into their toxic orbit. I had worked too hard, come too far to let them drag me back down into the darkness. And so, with a sense of resolve, I made a conscious decision to focus on my own future, to pour all of my energy into building the life that I had always dreamed of. I threw myself into my writing, attending workshops and conferences, networking with other professionals in my field. Slowly but surely, my hard work began to pay off. My freelance business took off, and I found myself inundated with new clients and projects. I even started to gain recognition in my field, with my work being featured in prominent publications and online forums. But even as I celebrated these successes, I never lost sight of the lessons I had learned from my past. I knew that true happiness and fulfillment came not from external validation, but from a deep sense of self-worth and purpose. And so I continued to focus on my own growth and development, both personally and professionally. I traveled, explored new hobbies and interests, and surrounded myself with people who lifted me up and supported my dreams. As the years passed, I found myself looking back on my journey with a sense of pride and accomplishment. I had faced some of the darkest moments of my life, but I had emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. And while I knew that I would never forget the pain and betrayal of my past, I also knew that I had found a way to move forward, to build a life that was entirely my own. In the end, that was the true vindication, not in seeing Neil and his family suffer, but in knowing that I had triumphed over adversity, that I had found the strength and courage to create a future filled with love, laughter, and endless possibility. And as I looked out over the horizon, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the same resilience and determination that had brought me this far. For I was Naomi, a survivor, a thriver, and nothing could stop me now. As the years passed, I found myself reflecting more and more on the journey that had brought me to this point. It had been a long and difficult road, filled with pain and heartache, but also with moments of incredible joy and self-discovery. I thought back to those early days when I had first met Neil and fallen head over heels in love. We had been so young then, so full of hope and promise. I had truly believed that we would spend the rest of our lives together, building a future filled with love and laughter. But life had a way of throwing curveballs, and our marriage had slowly crumbled under the weight of Neil's lies and his family's toxic influence. I had spent years silently enduring their abuse, convinced that I was somehow to blame for their behavior. It wasn't until I found the strength to leave, to strike out on my own, and build a new life, that I realized just how much I had been holding myself back. Freed from the chains of my past, I had flourished in ways I never thought possible. My writing career had taken off, and I found myself in demand as a freelance editor and consultant. I traveled the world, exploring new cultures and immersing myself in the beauty and diversity of life. But even as I celebrated these successes, I never lost sight of what truly mattered. My daughter, Clara, remained my rock, my constant source of love and support. And as she built her own family, I found myself cherishing every moment I could spend with her and my grandchildren. It was during one of these visits that I found myself reflecting on the true meaning of resilience. Clara and I were sitting in her backyard, watching her children play on the grass. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything, and I felt a sense of peace wash over me. "You know, Mom," Clara said softly, turning to me with a smile, "I've been thinking a lot about everything you've been through, and I just wanted to say how proud I am of you." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, and I reached out to take her hand in mine. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I couldn't have done it without you. You've been my strength, my guiding light through all of this." Clara squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with love and admiration. "You give me too much credit," she said with a laugh. "You're the one who had the courage to leave, to start over and build a new life. That takes a special kind of strength, Mom. A strength that I hope I can pass on to my own children." I nodded, feeling a sense of pride swell in my chest. Clara was right. I had faced some of the darkest moments of my life, but I had emerged stronger, more resilient than ever before. And that was a legacy worth passing on, a gift that I could give to my grandchildren and all the generations to come. As the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more obstacles to overcome. But I also knew that I had the strength within me to face them head-on, to keep moving forward no matter what life threw my way. And so as I sat there in the twilight, surrounded by the love and laughter of my family, I made a silent promise to myself. I would continue to live my life with resilience and self-worth, cherishing my autonomy and independence. I would be a role model for my grandchildren, showing them that it was never too late to start over, to build a life filled with purpose and meaning. For I was Naomi, a survivor, a thriver, and nothing could stop me now. I had conquered the trials of my past, and I was ready to embrace a future filled with endless possibility, anchored by the unshakable strength of my own resilience. The dinner table was set with Mom's finest china, the kind she only brought out for special occasions. The smell of roasted chicken wafted through the air, making my mouth water. It should have been a pleasant family gathering, but the tension was palpable. "Dee, dear, you really should have made more of an effort with your appearance," Mom said, eyeing my casual outfit with disdain. "This is a special night." I forced a smile, ignoring the jab. "It smells delicious, Mom. Thank you for hosting us." Tom squeezed my hand under the table, his way of offering silent support. At least he was on my side, or so I thought. As we started eating, Mom launched into a monologue about the importance of family legacy and carrying on the family name. Her pointed glances in my direction made the subtext clear. My inability to have children was a constant source of disappointment. "Which is why," she continued, "we've been discussing some exciting changes for our family's future." Tom shifted uncomfortably in his seat and a knot formed in my stomach. This didn't sound good. "You see, Dee," Mom said, her voice sickly sweet, "while we love you dearly, the fact remains that you're unable to provide an heir. A great injustice, really, given how devoted Tom has been." I felt Tom tense beside me, but he remained silent. Anger and hurt bubbled up inside me as Mom's words sank in. "So, we've decided to welcome a new addition to the family, a younger, more fertile woman who can give us the grandchildren we so desperately desire." The room spun as I processed her words. A new wife for Tom? How could he betray me like this? "You can't be serious," I managed, my voice shaking. "Tom, tell her she's out of her mind." But Tom wouldn't meet my gaze, his eyes fixed on his plate. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. He was in on this twisted plan. "Don't look so shocked, dear," Mom said, her smile never wavering. "This was always the arrangement. You knew your role was temporary." Memories of our early days together flooded my mind. The promises of forever, the dreams we'd shared. All lies, it seemed. "How could you do this to me?" I asked Tom, fighting back tears. "After everything we've been through." He finally looked up, his expression a mixture of guilt and resignation. "I'm sorry, Dee, but my mother is right. We need an heir. It's for the good of the family." The betrayal cut deep, a knife twisting in my gut. In that moment, I saw my husband and mother-in-law for who they truly were, manipulative, selfish people who viewed me as disposable. As the shock gave way to anger, I made a decision. I would not go quietly. If they wanted a war, I would give them one they'd never forget. Pushing back from the table, I met Mom's cold stare with newfound resolve. "You haven't seen the last of me," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging inside. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." With that, I turned and walked out, leaving my shattered dreams behind. But a new fire burned within me, a determination to fight for what was rightfully mine. They wanted an heir? Well, they were about to get more than they bargained for. A few days after the disastrous dinner, Mom called to invite me over for a casual gathering with some of the community women. I knew it was a trap, but I also saw an opportunity to start fighting back. As I walked into her immaculate living room, I was immediately surrounded by a group of well-dressed, gossiping ladies. Mom beamed at the center of it all, like a spider overseeing her web. "Ladies, you all know my dear daughter-in-law, Dee," she announced, gesturing for me to join her. "Come, let me properly introduce you." One by one, she paraded me in front of the women, each introduction laced with subtle digs about my age, my childlessness, my perceived inadequacies as a wife. The words stung, but I kept my composure, forcing a polite smile. "This is Marjorie, president of the gardening club. Isn't it a shame Dee has never shown an interest in cultivating life?" Mom said, with a pointed look. Marjorie gave me a pitying glance before turning away, whispering to her friend. It went on like that for what felt like an eternity. Mom's barbs growing sharper with each new acquaintance. Through it all, Tom lounged in the corner, nursing a drink and pointedly ignoring the spectacle. As the gathering wore on, I noticed a few of the women stealing sympathetic glances my way. Perhaps I had more allies than I realized. During a lull, I found myself beside Judith, an older woman known for her sharp wit and even sharper tongue. "Don't pay her any mind, dear," she murmured, patting my arm. "We all know Lorraine's just bitter because her own daughter abandoned her years ago." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued by this juicy bit of information. Judith gave me a conspiratorial wink before moving on. Suddenly, the endless parade of introductions took on a new light. These women weren't just Mom's adoring sycophants. They were a wealth of knowledge about her deepest insecurities and darkest secrets. And with a few well-placed allies, I could start turning the tide. As the gathering finally wound down, I made a point of thanking Mom for her hospitality with a pointed smile. She narrowed her eyes, sensing the shift in my demeanor. "This isn't over, Dolores," she hissed under her breath. "Not by a long shot." "Wouldn't have it any other way," I replied coolly, already formulating my next move. On my way out, I caught Tom's eye for the briefest moment. His gaze was hollow, empty, as if he'd already checked out of our marriage long ago. Fine by me. The less he was involved, the easier it would be to dismantle his mother's twisted schemes from the inside out. As I drove away from Mom's house, I felt a newfound sense of determination. She might have won the battle, but the war was just beginning. With a few unexpected allies in my corner, I was ready to fight for my life and make her regret ever crossing me. A few days after the disastrous community gathering, Lorraine ambushed me with another cruel demand. "We need to schedule you for a fertility test," she announced over coffee, not even looking up from her magazine. I nearly choked on my drink. "Excuse me? Why on earth would I do that?" She fixed me with a steely gaze. "To prove once and for all whether you're capable of providing an heir. If the results are positive, perhaps we can revisit this ridiculous notion of bringing in another woman." The audacity of her request stunned me into silence. After everything they'd put me through, they still expected me to jump through hoops? I opened my mouth to protest, but Tom cut me off. "Just do it, Dee," he said flatly. "The sooner we get this settled, the better for everyone." His callous disregard for my feelings felt like a slap in the face. Didn't my husband have any loyalty left? Realizing I was outnumbered, I agreed to the test, if only to buy myself some time. The procedure itself was mercifully quick, but the waiting was agonizing. Each day that ticked by, I imagined Lorraine growing more smug, more convinced that I would fail this latest trial. I couldn't let her win, not this time. Finally, the call came. The doctor's tone was carefully neutral as she relayed the results. I was still fertile, very much capable of conceiving a child. An immense weight lifted from my shoulders, and for a fleeting moment I felt a glimmer of hope that this nightmare might actually end. That hope was swiftly extinguished when I shared the news with Lorraine and Tom. Rather than being pleased, or even relieved, Lorraine's expression remained cold and calculating. "Well, isn't that interesting?" she mused. "Though I can't say I'm surprised. These things have a way of working themselves out in the end." Tom said nothing, his face an inscrutable mask. In that moment, I realized with sickening clarity that the test had never been about giving me a fair chance. To them, I was an inconvenient obstacle to be disposed of, no matter what the results showed. Memories came flooding back of those early days with Tom, when we discussed having children of our own. I remembered the tenderness in his eyes, the excitement in his voice as he painted pictures of our future family. Now, it was as if that man had never existed, replaced by this hollow stranger who valued his mother's whims above all else. As Lorraine droned on about needing to explore other options, I tuned her out, my mind racing. For weeks, I'd been reactionary, constantly scrambling to counter her latest move. But no more. It was time to take control of the situation, to turn the tables on these two manipulators before they could do any more damage. I would play along for now, I decided, lulling them into a false sense of complacency. And then, when they least expected it, I would strike, exposing their deceit and hypocrisy for all to see. This time, I would be the one dictating the terms. Lorraine's voice finally broke through my reverie. "Are you listening, Dolores? We need to start interviewing potential surrogates immediately." I met her gaze, my expression carefully neutral. Of course, whatever you think is best. The words tasted like acid, but I forced myself to smile. Let them believe they'd won, for now. Soon enough, they would realize they had underestimated me at their peril. This was no longer just a fight for my marriage. It was a battle for my dignity, my self-worth. And I didn't intend to lose. That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, a sickening realization washed over me. This entire marriage had been a sham, a twisted game orchestrated by Lorraine, with Tham as her willing pawn. Memories came flooding back of our early days together, when we'd excitedly discussed our hopes and dreams for starting a family. I remembered Tom's tender reassurances that we had all the time in the world, that children would come when the moment was right. "We'll figure it out together, babe," he'd murmured, pulling me close. "No need to rush into anything." Now, in the harsh light of day, those words rang hollow, a carefully constructed lie designed to lure me into Lorraine's trap, because the truth was they'd never intended for me to be a permanent part of this family. The signs had been there all along, but I'd been too blinded by love and optimism to see them. Like the time Tom casually mentioned that his parents expected him to provide them with grandchildren, no matter what, or the way Lorraine had bristled at my reluctance to move into her home after our wedding. "It's just until we get on our feet," she'd said with a saccharine smile. "You don't mind a brief stint under my roof, do you, dear?" That brief stint had turned into years of walking on eggshells, enduring her endless critiques and power plays, all while Tom stood idly by, ceding more and more control to the woman who'd raised him. I should have run then, I realized, escaped before allowing myself to be slowly suffocated by their toxic dynamic. But some foolish part of me had clung to the belief that love could conquer all, that Tom would eventually grow a spine and stand up to his mother's manipulations. As I replayed our heated argument from earlier, any remaining doubts evaporated. Tom's callous admission that I was always meant to be a temporary solution, easily discarded once a more suitable option presented itself. It was a brutal awakening, exposing the true depths of his betrayal. White-hot anger surged through me, quickly followed by a wave of icy determination. If they thought I would simply slink away in disgrace, they had vastly underestimated me. I would stay and fight, unleashing a vengeance so exquisite, so utterly devastating, that they would have no choice but to rue the day they dared to cross me. Tom's meek compliance would be his undoing, the rope by which I hanged his pathetic dreams of legacy and inheritance. And Lorraine, that smug, domineering shrew, would find her world crumbling around her, victim to the same twisted machinations she'd so gleefully inflicted on me. A feral grin spread across my face as delicious scenarios began taking shape. This was no longer about salvaging some sliver of dignity. It was about complete and utter obliteration, leaving their selfish ambitions in ashes around them. Let them believe they'd won, I decided. Let them bask in their false sense of victory. Because soon enough, the tables would turn, and I would be the one dictating the terms of our little game. Closing my eyes, I could already envision their stunned, horrified expressions as the truth finally dawned. They wanted an heir to continue their precious legacy? Well, they were about to get far more than they bargained for. In the days that followed, Lorraine's campaign of emotional torture intensified. Everywhere I turned, she was there, chipping away at my self-worth with her snide remarks and undisguised looks of contempt. "Really, Dolores? You're gonna wear that?" She'd eyeing my outfit with disdain. So frumpy. No wonder Tom's lost interest. I grit my teeth, determined not to rise to the bait. Losing my composure was exactly what she wanted. At first, Tom stayed out of it, content to let his mother do the heavy lifting when it came to demoralizing me. But soon enough, even he joined the fray, parroting Lorraine's insults about my inability to give him a child, my failure as a wife. "Maybe if you'd put in a bit more effort," he sneered one morning as I headed off to work, my sole refuge from the toxicity at home. Even there, I found no peace. Lorraine's constant demands that I contribute more financially to secure the family's future left me drained at the end of each day. I dutifully wrote a check for $1,000 every month, a sick feeling settling in my gut as I did. So this was my reward for years of loyal service, to be bled dry by the very people who claimed to care for me. The breaking point came when Lorraine announced, with fake sweetness, "The surrogates will be here this weekend for interviews. You'll want to be on your best behavior, Dolores." I could no longer hold my tongue. "Are you kidding me? After everything you've put me through, you expect me to just roll over for this?" Tom's eyes went wide, but Lorraine simply shrugged, unperturbed. "Well, I did give you a chance to do things the proper way, but you've made your choice clear." "My choice?" I sputtered, indignant rage bubbling up inside me. "When did I ever choose any of this? You two cowards dragged me into this nightmare against my will." In that moment, Tom should have spoken up, should have defended me as his wife. Instead, he shrank back, cowed by his mother's withering glare. "That's enough out of you," Lorraine said coolly. "Why don't you run along like a good girl? The adults need to discuss family matters." The derisive dismissal was like a slap in the face. I opened my mouth, fully prepared to unleash the torrent of hurt and anger that had been building up for months. But something stopped me. Suddenly, it all became clear. This was what Lorraine wanted. She thrived on confrontation, on exerting her dominance over me through sheer force of will. Any outburst on my part would only serve to feed her power trip. A strange sense of calm washed over me, and I felt the fight go out of me, at least for the moment. Straightening my shoulders, I met Lorraine's gaze steadily. "You know what? You're right," I said, keeping my voice even. "I'm just going to step aside and let you two continue making decisions for this family. Seems to be working out so well for you both." Lorraine blinked, clearly thrown by my uncharacteristic acquiescence. But her smugness quickly returned. "Finally, she sees reason. I knew you'd come around eventually, dear." I didn't bother responding, turning on my heel and heading for the door. Let them think they'd beaten me. Let them revel in their hollow victory. Because in that moment, I knew the game had changed. No more reacting, no more falling into their twisted manipulations. From now on, I would be the one dictating the terms, and by the time I was done, they wouldn't know what hit them. I should have seen it coming, really. The signs were all there. Lorraine's increasingly smug demeanor, Tom's guilty silences whenever I tried to discuss our future. But when I walked through the front door that fateful evening, the harsh reality still hit me like a ton of bricks. There, perched on the living room sofa like she owned the place, was a young woman I'd never seen before. Sleek and polished, with an air of self-assurance that could only come from years of being catered to. This was her, I realized with sickening clarity, the usurper they'd handpicked to take my place. "Ah, Dolores, there you are," Lorraine said, rising to greet me with a saccharine smile. "Allow me to introduce Angela. She'll be joining our family shortly." The smug emphasis on those last few words left no doubt as to Angela's intended role. I felt bile rise in my throat as Tom shifted awkwardly beside the interloper, unable to meet my gaze. "You've got to be kidding me," I managed, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Tom, please tell me this is some kind of sick joke." For a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Shame, maybe, or the last vestiges of the man I'd fallen in love with. But then Lorraine stepped between us, her expression hardening. "Don't be so dramatic, Dolores. You knew this day was coming." She gestured dismissively in my direction. "She's getting on in years, and her condition makes her unsuitable for carrying on the family name. Isn't that right, dear?" Tom said nothing, his silence hanging heavy in the air. Anger and hurt welled up inside me, quickly segueing into a cold, bitter sense of resignation. After everything, he still couldn't find the courage to stand up for me, for our marriage. "You're despicable, both of you," I spat, glaring at Lorraine and the smirking Angela in turn. "Using people's lives like this, discarding them when they no longer serve your purposes. I don't know what's worse, your cruelty or your cowardice." Lorraine merely shrugged, unperturbed. "Strong words from someone in your precarious position, but I suppose that's to be expected." With a sickening lurch, I realized she was holding something in her hands, a manila envelope, no doubt containing the final insult they had prepared for me. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked warily, but I already knew the answer. "Well, we can't very well have you lingering about once Angela arrives, now can we?" Lorraine replied, her smile taking on a predatory edge. "These are the divorce papers, which will allow you to exit this family with a modicum of dignity intact. though I shudder to think how you'll get by without us." The room started to spin as she extended the envelope toward me. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading, the point of no return, where I would have to decide whether to go down swinging or slink away in disgrace. Part of me wanted to fight, to rage against the injustice of it all. But another, wearier part knew that there was no point in prolonging this toxic charade any further. Lorraine and Tom had made their decision, callously prioritizing their twisted idea of legacy over anything resembling basic human decency. So with a heavy heart and a lump in my throat, I reached out and took the envelope, already feeling the weight of my shattered dreams pressing down on me. "Don't worry, I'll be just fine without you," I said, mustering what little dignity I had left. In fact, I'd say the world just got a whole lot brighter. Lorraine's mocking laughter followed me out the door, but I didn't care. The papers were signed, the bridge burned, and as I drove away from that wretched house, I made a silent vow to myself. One day soon, they would regret ever underestimating me. For now, though, I needed to lick my wounds and chart a new course, one free from their toxic influence. But mark my words, vengeance would be mine. They wanted to cast me aside like some unwanted burden. Well, they were about to learn just how heavy that burden could become. In the aftermath of my brutal ousting from the family, I found myself adrift, reeling from the depths of Lorraine and Tom's betrayal, yet simultaneously liberated from their toxic grip. With nowhere else to turn, I did the only thing I could. I went home, back to the warm embrace of my parents and the life I'd left behind so many years ago. "That son of a bitch!" My father growled when I recounted the sordid tale, fists clenching with a rare burst of anger. "After everything you sacrificed for that family." Mom simply held me close, her gentle shushing the only balm for the ragged wound in my heart. In their cozy little ranch home, surrounded by decades of cherished memories, I finally felt safe enough to process the devastating turn my life had taken. But even as I grieved my shattered dreams, a newfound sense of determination took root. I was done being a victim, done letting Lorraine and her cronies dictate my worth. It was time to show them and myself what I was truly capable of when freed from their toxic influence. The first step, I decided, was to rebuild my financial security. While Tom and his mother had been content to bleed me dry, I'd been quietly squirreling away funds, investing in a passion project that had become my own little secret. With my parents' support, I threw myself into making that dream a reality. Months passed in a whirlwind of hard work and renewed purpose. Before I knew it, the dilapidated flower shop I'd bought on a whim had been transformed into a thriving business, its rustic charm and premium blooms drawing rave reviews from customers across the city. My own little oasis far removed from the suffocating world of Lorraine's making. Which was why, when the local news crew showed up to do a feel-good segment on the shop's success, I didn't hesitate to seize the opportunity. "Behind every flower there's a story," I said earnestly into the camera, carefully manicured hands caressing a vibrant red rose. A tale of resilience, of blossoming against all odds. That's what this place represents to me. A chance to start anew, to cultivate something truly beautiful out of even the most barren of circumstances. The words rang with authenticity, each one carrying the weight of my own hard-won rebirth. And later, as the segment aired to thousands of viewers across the city, I couldn't help but savor the delicious twist of fate it represented. Because there, I knew Lorraine and Tom would be watching, their own circumstances drastically diminished in the wake of my departure. And as the camera panned over the bustling shop, showcasing my hard-earned success in high definition, they would be forced to confront the harsh truth they'd tried so desperately to deny. I was not the failure they'd sought to discard. I was a woman reborn, thriving precisely because I'd had the courage to shed the shackles they tried to bind me with. And with my newfound power and self-assurance, I had no intention of fading back into meek obscurity. No, this was just the opening salvo, the first taste of the reckoning that was to come. Lorraine and Tom wanted to cast me aside like garbage? Fine. They were about to learn just how hazardous their precious legacy could be when it fell into the wrong hands. The game was just beginning, and this time, I held all the cards. It was the annual neighborhood block party, and the air was thick with the scent of charred burgers and cheap beer. Normally, this was the kind of event I avoided like the plague, too much forced socializing, too many prying eyes. But this year was different. This year, I had a point to prove. As I made my way through the crowd, heads turned and whispers rippled in my wake. News of my very public split from Tom and his venomous mother had spread like wildfire, no doubt fueled by their own twisted version of events. But I didn't care. Let them talk. Soon enough, they would be singing a very different tune. Well, well, if it isn't the woman of the hour, a familiar voice rang out, dripping with disdain. I turned to find Lorraine bearing down on me, Tom skulking a few paces behind like a beaten dog. Angela was mercifully absent, though I had no illusions about her eventual appearance. "Lorraine," I replied coolly, refusing to be baited. "Lovely to see you out and about. Keeping busy, I trust?" She sneered at my nonchalant tone. "Don't play coy with me, Dolores. We both know you've been putting on quite the performance lately with your newfound success." The way she spat out that last word spoke volumes. To Lorraine, my independence was a personal affront, a threat to the natural order she'd worked so hard to maintain. Tom shifted uncomfortably beside her, his gaze flitting anywhere but my face. I almost felt sorry for the pathetic bastard. "If you're referring to my blossoming business ventures, I don't see how that's any of your concern," I said evenly. "But since you brought it up, things are going swimmingly. I'd offer you a bouquet, but I have a strict policy against fraternizing with snakes." A few nearby partygoers failed to stifle their laughter, emboldening me. Lorraine's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You think you've won, don't you?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "That by prancing around with your little flower shop, putting on airs for the neighborhood, you've somehow bested me?" I shrugged unconcerned. "I don't think anything, Lorraine. I know I've won. Why else would you be standing here, so clearly threatened by my mere existence?" The barb hit its mark, and I could see the fury building behind her cold eyes. Good. Let her rage, let her spiral into the toxic pit of her own making. I was no longer afraid. "You arrogant little—" she began, but a warm hand on my arm stopped her in her tracks. It was Judith, bless her soul, flanked by a small cluster of the community ladies who'd borne witness to my humiliation all those months ago. "Is there a problem here, Dee?" she asked pointedly, her sharp gaze cutting into Lorraine. "Only we couldn't help but overhear this unpleasantness." Lorraine visibly bristled at the subtle rebuke, her mouth working furiously as she struggled to regain her composure. In that moment, it was clear. The tides had turned, and she was swiftly becoming the outcast in her own social circle. "No problem at all, Judith," I replied, squeezing her hand gratefully. "Lorraine was just reminiscing about old times. Weren't you, dear?" The sickly sweet endearment hung in the air like a challenge, and I could see Lorraine's hands curling into fists as she fought for control. This time, though, she remained silent, seemingly aware that any outburst would only further alienate her. "Well, isn't that nice?" Judith said, her tone making it abundantly clear that it was anything but. "Why don't you ladies run along, then? I'm sure Dee has much better things to do with her time." It was a blatant dismissal, and an utterly masterful one at that. As the cluster of women closed ranks around me, Lorraine could only gape impotently, her carefully cultivated facade of genteel superiority crumbling by the second. "This isn't over," she managed finally, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "You mark my words, Dolores, you haven't seen the last of me." "I certainly hope not," I shot back, feeling emboldened by the support of my newfound allies. "Watching you unravel promises to be immensely satisfying." With that, I turned on my heel, leaving her to stew in her own bitter juices as I rejoined the party. The battle lines had been drawn, and for the first time, I held the higher ground. Lorraine's twisted legacy was already cracking at the seams, and I had no intention of letting up until it lay in ruins at my feet. "Edith, I can't believe you did this." My mother-in-law's voice was sharp, her face a mask of disbelief. I stood there, clutching the letter that revealed Mark's secret life. My world shattered in that instant. "What is the meaning of this?" Gloria demanded, snatching the letter from my trembling hands. Before I could respond, Mark stormed into the room, his expression thunderous. "What's going on here?" I swallowed hard, my throat constricting with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark's eyes narrowed. None of your business, Edith, he retorted, turning away. Gloria thrust the letter at him. Explain this, Mark. Your wife has uncovered your little secret. Mark's jaw tightened as he scanned the contents. It's not what you think, he muttered, refusing to meet my gaze. Not what I think, I echoed, my voice rising. This letter details your affair with Michelle, a woman half my age. Watch your tone, Edith, Gloria snapped. This is a family matter. I whirled on her, my composure cracking. A family matter? While your son was gallivanting around with his mistress, I was here, holding everything together. Mark scoffed. Don't act so innocent. You've been a cold, distant wife for years. Because you've been emotionally absent. I shot back. Late nights, unexplained absences. It all makes sense now. Gloria stepped between us, her eyes flashing. Enough of this nonsense. We will not let this ruin our family's reputation. I stared at her, incredulous. Reputation? Your son has been carrying on an affair, and you're worried about reputation? You've always been a poor excuse for a wife, Gloria sniped. No wonder Mark strayed. Yet I'm the one holding this family together, I replied calmly, my anger hardening into resolve. Mark laughed bitterly. Is that what you think? You're delusional, Edith. I met his gaze, unflinching. No, Mark. I'm finally seeing clearly, and I'm done living a lie. Gloria's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't dare leave this family. I straightened my shoulders, a newfound strength surging through me. Watch me. Turning on my heel, I strode out of the room, leaving my shattered marriage behind. It was time to start living for myself and my son, Peter. No more lies, no more toxic relationships. A new chapter was beginning, and I was ready to embrace it, come what may. As I lay in bed that night, the weight of Mark's betrayal pressed down on me like a suffocating blanket. Memories of our once happy marriage flickered through my mind, taunting me with what could have been. How did we reach this point? I thought bitterly. The signs had been there all along. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the growing emotional distance. But I had chosen to turn a blind eye, desperate to preserve the illusion of a perfect family. Gloria's words echoed in my head, each one a dagger to my heart. You've always been a poor excuse for a wife. No wonder Mark strayed. Tears stung my eyes as I recalled the countless sacrifices I had made for this family, putting my own dreams and aspirations aside to be the dutiful wife and mother. And what did I have to show for it? A cheating husband and a manipulative mother-in-law who delighted in twisting the knife deeper. A soft knock on the door jolted me from my thoughts. Mom? Peter's voice was tentative, laced with concern. I hastily wiped my eyes and cleared my throat. Come in, sweetheart. Peter slipped into the room, his brow furrowed. Are you okay? I heard shouting earlier. Mustering a brave smile, I patted the bed beside me. It's nothing for you to worry about, honey. Just some grown-up issues. He settled next to me, his eyes searching mine. Is it about Dad? I know things haven't been great between you two lately. I sighed, my heart aching at the thought of shattering his innocence. Your father and I are going through a difficult time. Yes, but we'll figure it out one way or another. Peter nodded solemnly. I just want us to be a family again, like we used to be. His words pierced my soul. How could I tell him that the family he knew was already gone, torn apart by Mark's selfish actions? I pulled him into a tight embrace, blinking back fresh tears. I love you, Peter, I whispered fiercely. No matter what happens, remember that. He hugged me back, his skinny arms wrapping around me with a strength that belied his age. I love you too, Mom. We'll get through this together. As I held my son close, a newfound determination surged within me. I would not let Mark's betrayal define us. I would not allow Gloria's toxic influence to poison our lives any longer. It was time to take control, to forge a new path, one where Peter and I could find true happiness, free from the shackles of a broken marriage and toxic family dynamics. The road ahead would be difficult, but with my son by my side, I knew I had the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. This was just the beginning of our journey towards healing and redemption. And I would stop at nothing to ensure that Peter and I emerged from this storm stronger and more resilient than ever before. The next morning, I steeled myself for another confrontation with Mark. As I entered the kitchen, he was already there, sipping coffee and reading the newspaper as if nothing had happened. We need to talk, I said, my voice firm. Mark glanced up, his expression bored. About what, Edith? I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to hurl the nearest object at his smug face. About your little secret, the affair you've been carrying on behind my back. He snorted derisively. So you found out. Big deal. It's not like we've had a real marriage for years. My jaw dropped at his callous words. How can you say that? I've devoted my life to this family, to being a good wife and mother. And a lousy job you've done, Gloria chimed in, sweeping into the room. If you had been a better wife, Mark wouldn't have strayed. I rounded on her, my temper flaring. Stay out of this, Gloria. This is between me and your son. Like hell it is, she snapped. This involves my family, and I won't let you ruin it with your dramatics. Mark set down his coffee mug, his eyes narrowing. Enough of this. I'm leaving for a week, Edith. Try not to mess things up while I'm gone. I stared at him, incredulous. You're leaving? Just like that? He shrugged, already gathering his things. I need a break from all this nonsense. Don't wait up. As he brushed past me, I felt a surge of anger and despair. How could he be so callous, so dismissive of our marriage, our family? And yet, a part of me couldn't help but feel relieved at the prospect of a temporary reprieve from his toxic presence. Gloria fixed me with a steely glare. You'd better not do anything rash while he's gone, Edith. This family has a reputation to uphold. I met her gaze, my resolve hardening. Don't worry, Gloria. I can manage without him just fine. As Mark's car pulled out of the driveway, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in years, I wouldn't have to walk on eggshells, constantly trying to appease his whims and Gloria's demands. Peter emerged from his room, his brow furrowed. Is Dad really leaving? I pulled him into a reassuring hug. It's just for a week, honey. We'll be okay. His arms tightened around me. I don't like it when you two fight. My heart clenched at the sadness in his voice. I know, sweetheart, but sometimes grown-ups have to work through their problems in their own way. As I held my son close, I silently vowed to protect him from the toxic environment that had consumed our family for far too long. This week would be a chance for us to breathe, to remember what it felt like to live without the constant weight of Mark's emotional absence and Gloria's manipulative interference. And who knows? Maybe, just maybe, this temporary separation would be the catalyst for something more permanent. A chance for me to finally break free and build the life Peter and I deserved, far away from the toxicity that had plagued us for so long. The first few days of Mark's absence were a welcome reprieve, but my relief was short-lived. On the third day, Peter came down with a high fever, and my world was thrown into chaos once again. It's a fever, Mom, but he's burning up. I don't know what to do. I sobbed into the phone, cradling my ailing son in my arms. We're on our way, darling. Hang in there. My mother's soothing voice came through the line. I tried my best to keep Peter comfortable, but his condition only seemed to worsen. Gloria hovered nearby, her disapproving glares piercing through me like daggers. This is what happens when you don't have a proper man around the house, she sniffed, her words dripping with disdain. I bit back a retort, too exhausted and worried to engage in her toxic games. All that mattered was getting Peter the help he needed. When my parents finally arrived, my mother swooped in like a guardian angel, taking charge of the situation with a calm efficiency that I envied. Let me take a look at him, sweetheart, she murmured, gently brushing Peter's sweat-soaked hair from his forehead. My father pulled me into a comforting embrace, his eyes filled with concern. How are you holding up, Edith? I shook my head, fighting back tears. I'm at my wit's end, Dad. Mark's gone, and Gloria's been no help at all. I don't know what to do. Gloria scoffed from the corner. If you had been a better wife, none of this would be happening. My father's eyes flashed with anger. That's enough, Gloria. Can't you see my daughter is struggling? Where's your compassion? Compassion? Gloria sneered. She brought this upon herself by driving Mark away. I flinched as if struck, her words cutting deeper than any physical blow. Was she right? Had my confrontation with Mark about his affair pushed him to abandon us in our time of need? My mother's voice cut through the tension, her tone firm but gentle. Edith, why don't you come and sit with Peter for a while? I'll make us all some tea. Grateful for the reprieve, I settled beside my son's bed, gently stroking his flushed cheek. His eyes fluttered open, and he managed a weak smile. Mom, I'm sorry for causing so much trouble, he whispered. My heart broke at his words. Oh, honey, you have nothing to be sorry for. I'm the one who's sorry for letting things get so out of hand. Peter's brow furrowed. Is it because of Dad? I know you two haven't been getting along. I swallowed hard, unsure of how much to reveal. Your father and I are going through some difficult times, yes. But that's not your fault, sweetheart. You're the one thing in my life that brings me joy. His small hand found mine, and he gave it a gentle squeeze. I love you, Mom. We'll get through this together. In that moment, my son's unwavering love and strength filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. No matter what obstacles lay ahead, I would fight tooth and nail to protect him from the toxicity that had plagued our family for far too long. As my mother returned with a tray of steaming tea, I met her gaze with a newfound determination. With her and my father's support, I knew I had the strength to weather any storm, even one as tempestuous as the one brewing between Mark, Gloria, and me. Just when I thought the storm had passed, the phone rang, shattering the fragile peace we had found. My heart raced as I answered, bracing myself for more bad news. Edith, there's been an accident. You need to come to the hospital, the voice on the other end urged. My blood ran cold. What happened? Is it Peter? No, it's Mark. He was in a car accident. Relief and anger flooded through me in equal measure. Relief that my son was safe, but anger that Mark's recklessness had once again disrupted our lives. What happened? I asked, my voice trembling. There was a pause, and then the caller spoke the words that would change everything. Mark was with another woman. The world seemed to spin as the weight of those words sank in. His affair, the secret he had so carefully guarded, was now exposed for all to see. I felt a twisted sense of vindication, knowing that his lies had finally caught up with him. I'll be right there, I managed, hanging up the phone. My parents exchanged worried glances, sensing the shift in my demeanor. Edith, what's going on? My mother asked gently. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Mark was in an accident. He was with his mistress. Gloria's face drained of color, her usual haughty expression replaced by one of shock and dismay. For once she was speechless, my father's brow furrowed. Are you all right, sweetheart? Do you want us to come with you? I shook my head, a newfound determination surging through me. No, Dad. This is something I need to handle on my own. As I made my way to the hospital, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The secrets, the lies, the betrayal. It was all out in the open now. Mark had no more cards to play, no more excuses to hide behind. When I arrived at his room, the sight of him lying there, battered and vulnerable, should have filled me with pity. Instead, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, knowing that he was finally facing the consequences of his actions. Edith, he croaked, his eyes widening as I approached his bedside. Don't bother, Mark, I said, holding up a hand to silence him. I know everything. Your little secret is out. He flinched, his gaze dropping in shame. For once he had no snide remarks, no dismissive comments to deflect the truth. So, what now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Now, we face the reality of our situation. No more lies, no more secrets. It's time to decide what we really want. Mark's eyes met mine, a flicker of defiance still burning within them. And what if I don't want to let you go? I held his gaze, my resolve unwavering. That's not your decision to make anymore, Mark. You lost that right the moment you betrayed our marriage. As the weight of my words settled over him, I felt a sense of power, a newfound strength that had been buried for far too long. The tables had turned, and for once, I was the one in control. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would no longer be a victim of Mark's selfish actions or Gloria's toxic manipulations. It was time to take back my life, to fight for the happiness and peace that had eluded me for far too long. And as I looked into Mark's defeated eyes, I knew that this time I would emerge victorious, no matter the cost. The hospital room was thick with tension as I faced Mark, his battered form a stark reminder of the consequences of his actions. For once he seemed subdued, unable to deflect the harsh reality that had come crashing down upon us. So, this is it, Mark, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging within me. We're done. I held out the divorce papers, the weight of their implications heavy in my hands. This was the moment I had both dreaded and longed for, the chance to finally sever the toxic ties that had bound us for far too long. Mark's eyes widened, a flicker of defiance still burning within them. You wouldn't dare, he growled, his words laced with a familiar arrogance. I met his gaze, unflinching. Watch me, As he stared at the papers, his bravado seemed to falter, replaced by a rare glimpse of vulnerability. For a fleeting moment, I almost felt pity for him. Almost. "After everything we've been through, you're just going to throw it all away?" he asked, his voice tinged with desperation. I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter sound that echoed through the sterile room. "Everything we've been through? You mean the years of emotional neglect, the constant disrespect, the lies and betrayal?" Mark flinched, his eyes dropping to the stark white sheets that covered his battered form. "You did this, Mark," I continued, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pent-up frustration. "You destroyed our marriage with your selfish actions, your complete disregard for our family." His jaw clenched, but he remained silent, unable to deflect the truth that hung heavy in the air between us. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I put my dreams aside, sacrificed my own happiness, all for the sake of our family. And how did you repay me? By carrying on an affair with a woman half my age, flaunting your infidelity for the world to see." Mark opened his mouth, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Don't bother making excuses, Mark. It's too late for that. The damage is done, and there's no going back." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Sign the papers, Mark. It's over." His eyes met mine, a flicker of defiance still burning within their depths. "And if I refuse?" I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter sound that echoed through the sterile room. "Then you'll be left with nothing. No wife, no family, no reputation. Just the consequences of your own selfish actions." As the weight of my words settled over him, I could see the fight draining from his eyes, replaced by a weary resignation. "Fine," he muttered, reaching for the pen beside his bed. "Have it your way, Edith." With a shaky hand, he scrawled his signature across the papers, sealing our fate with a few strokes of ink. As I gathered the documents, a sense of finality washed over me. It was done. The chapter of my life that had been defined by Mark's toxic presence was finally closed. "I hope it was worth it, Mark," I said, my voice laced with a mixture of sadness and triumph. "Because from this moment on, you're on your own." Turning on my heel, I strode out of the room, leaving him to grapple with the wreckage of our shattered marriage. A weight had been lifted from my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to face it head-on, armed with a newfound sense of strength and resilience. Mark's betrayal had been a harsh lesson, but it had also been a catalyst for change, a chance to break free from the toxic cycle that had consumed our lives for far too long. As I stepped out into the crisp morning air, I took a deep breath, savoring the taste of freedom. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would write my own story, free from the shackles of a loveless marriage and the toxic influence of those who sought to control me. And as the sun rose over the horizon, I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope and possibility, a promise of better days to come, where I would finally be the master of my own destiny. As I strode out of Mark's hospital room, the weight of our shattered marriage finally lifted from my shoulders, I was met with a familiar, unwelcome sight. Gloria, her face contorted in a mask of fury. "What have you done, Edith?" she hissed, her eyes boring into me like daggers. I squared my shoulders, refusing to be intimidated. "What needed to be done, Gloria? Mark and I are through." Her nostrils flared, and she took a step closer, her presence looming over me like a dark cloud. "You will not ruin this family, Edith. Not after everything we've built." I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter sound that echoed through the sterile hallway. "The family was already ruined, Gloria, and I won't be part of it anymore." Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought she might strike me. "So you're just going to abandon your husband in his time of need? After all he's done for you?" I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. "Don't try to twist this, Gloria. Mark brought this upon himself with his selfish actions. He's the one who betrayed our vows, our family." Gloria's lips curled into a sneer. "And you think you're blameless in all this? If you had been a better wife, a more attentive partner, he wouldn't have strayed." Her words stung, but I refused to let them pierce my newfound armor. "That's a convenient excuse, Gloria, but we both know the truth." Her brow furrowed, and she took a step closer, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "What truth?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "That you knew about Mark's affair all along. that you helped him cover it up just to preserve your precious family image. Gloria's face drained of color, and for a moment she seemed at a loss for words. Then her eyes narrowed and she regained her composure. So what if I did? She spat. I was protecting our family, something you clearly have no concept of. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. You were protecting your own selfish interests, Gloria, just like Mark, and I'm done being a pawn in your twisted games. Her jaw clenched, and I could see the fury simmering just beneath the surface. You ungrateful little wretch. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. You've done nothing for me, Gloria. All you've ever done is tear me down, make me feel small and insignificant. Well, no more. Her eyes widened, and she took a step back, as if struck by my words. I'm taking my life back, Gloria, I continued, my voice steady and unwavering, and you and Mark can no longer stand in my way. For a moment we stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills, the tension crackling between us like electricity. Then Gloria's shoulders slumped, and I saw a flicker of something I never thought I'd see in her eyes. Defeat. Fine, she muttered, her voice laced with venom. Have it your way, Edith, but don't come crawling back when you realize the mistake you've made. With that, she turned on her heel and stormed away, leaving me standing in the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. As the adrenaline coursed through my veins, I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. For years, Gloria had held me in her iron grip, using her manipulative tactics to control every aspect of my life. But not anymore. I was free, truly free, for the first time in as long as I could remember. And as I turned to leave the hospital, a newfound sense of purpose propelled me forward. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I would write my own story, free from the toxic influence of those who sought to control me. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to face it head-on, armed with a strength and resilience that had been forged in the fires of adversity. As I stepped out into the warm embrace of the sun, I couldn't help but smile. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time it was mine to shape, to mold into something beautiful and fulfilling. And as I made my way home to the son who had been my unwavering source of strength and inspiration, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A united front, bound by a love that could never be broken, even by the most toxic of influences. The weight of the past few weeks seemed to lift from my shoulders as I stepped through the front door, greeted by the familiar warmth of home. Peter rushed to embrace me, his eyes shining with a mixture of relief and concern. Mom, you're back. Is everything okay? I pulled him close, savoring the moment. Everything's going to be just fine, sweetheart. Better than fine. He pulled back, his brow furrowed. What do you mean? What happened with Dad? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. Peter, your father and we're separating. His eyes widened, and I could see the questions forming on his lips. I know this is a lot to take in, I continued, guiding him to the couch. But it's for the best, believe me. Peter nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that belied his age. Is it because of the fighting and Dad's, his other woman? I felt a pang of sadness that my son had been exposed to such ugliness, but I knew it was better to be honest with him. Yes, honey, your father made some choices that hurt our family deeply, and as much as I love him, I can't stay in a relationship like that anymore. Peter's eyes glistened with unshed tears. But what about us? Are we still a family? I pulled him into a fierce embrace, my heart swelling with love for this remarkable boy. Of course we are, Peter. You and I will always be a family, no matter what happens. And this time, it'll be a family built on love, respect, and honesty. He nodded against my shoulder, and I could feel the tension slowly leaving his body. I'm sorry you had to go through all this, sweetheart, I murmured, stroking his hair. But I promise, better days are ahead. As we sat there, holding each other close, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a calm certainty that I was finally on the right path. The road ahead would be challenging, but with Peter by my side, I knew we could weather any storm. In the days and weeks that followed, we settled into a new routine, one free from the toxic influence of Mark and Gloria. I reconnected with old friends, finding solace and support in their unwavering companionship. And slowly but surely, The wounds of the past began to heal. One sunny afternoon, as Peter and I strolled through the park, hand in hand, he turned to me with a smile that warmed my heart. "Mommy, can we visit Grandpa and Grandma tomorrow?" I couldn't help but grin, filled with gratitude for the loving family that had stood by us through it all. "Of course, darling. We're free to do whatever we want now." As we continued our walk, that surrounded by the laughter of children and the gentle rustling of leaves, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. This was the life I had dreamed of, a life filled with love, laughter, and the freedom to forge our own path. No longer would we be shackled by the toxic bonds of a broken marriage or the manipulative whims of those who sought to control us. We were free, truly free, to embrace the future on our own terms. And as I looked into Peter's eyes, shining with hope and possibility, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, a united front, bound by a love that could never be broken, even by the most toxic of influences. This was the beginning of our new chapter, one filled with endless possibilities and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. And as we walked hand in hand into the future, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and gratitude for the resilience that had carried us through the darkest of storms. We had emerged from the ashes of our past, stronger and more resilient than ever before. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, I knew that our journey had only just begun. A journey towards healing, happiness, and the reclamation of our lives on our own terms. I smoothed my apron and took a deep breath, steeling myself for another Sunday dinner with Gloria. The aroma of roast chicken filled the kitchen, but my stomach churned with dread. "Emily, dear, are you sure you used enough seasoning?" Gloria's syrupy voice drifted in from the dining room. "The last time it was so bland." I bit my tongue, resisting the urge to remind her that she'd praised that very same chicken recipe just last month. "I'm sure it'll be delicious, Gloria," I called back, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. Aaron appeared in the doorway, his brow furrowed. "Need any help, honey?" I shook my head, offering a tight smile. "I've got it under control. Why don't you keep your mother company?" He hesitated, clearly sensing the tension. "You know, Mom means well. She just— Aaron!" Gloria's voice cut through our conversation like a knife. "Come tell me about that big project at work. Emily can manage in the kitchen, I'm sure." I watched my husband's shoulders slump as he turned away, leaving me alone with my simmering resentment. As I carried the platter to the dining room, I caught sight of my reflection in the hall mirror. At 35, I looked older than my years, worry lines etched around my eyes. "There she is!" Gloria beamed, her perfectly coiffed silver hair gleaming in the soft light. I was beginning to wonder if we'd eat before midnight. I set the platter down, forcing a laugh. "Oh, Gloria, you're such a kidder." Aaron cleared his throat. "It looks great, Em, doesn't it, Mom?" Gloria peered at the chicken, her nose wrinkling slightly. "Well, it certainly looks interesting. Did you try that new recipe I sent you?" "Actually, because I specifically remember telling you how much Aaron loves lemon and rosemary. Didn't I, darling?" Aaron shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mom, Emily's chicken is always delicious. Let's just enjoy the meal, okay?" I sat down, my hands shaking slightly as I reached for the serving spoon. The meal progressed with Gloria peppering Aaron with questions about work, barely acknowledging my presence except to make thinly veiled criticisms about the food or the state of the house. "You know, Emily," Gloria said, dabbing at her mouth with a napkin, "I was talking to my friend Marge the other day. Her daughter-in-law works full-time and still manages to keep a spotless home. I don't know how she does it." I gripped my fork tighter. "Well, It's probably because she doesn't have children yet," Gloria continued, her eyes boring into mine. "Speaking of which, when are you two planning on giving me some grandchildren? I'm not getting any younger, you know." The room fell silent. I looked to Aaron, silently pleading for support, but he stared down at his plate. "We're still discussing it," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Gloria squeaked. "Well, don't wait too long. Tick-tock, dear." I abruptly stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Excuse me, I need some air." I fled to the back porch, gulping in the cool evening air. Tears pricked at my eyes as I leaned against the railing, wondering how much longer I could endure this weekly torment. The screen door creaked open behind me. Aaron's voice was soft, hesitant. I turned to face him, no longer able to hide my distress. I can't do this anymore, Aaron. Your mother, she's... I know, he said, running a hand through his hair. She can be a bit much, but she loves us in her own way. I shook my head, frustration bubbling up inside me. Love? Is that what you call it? She criticizes everything I do, makes me feel worthless in my own home. And you just sit there and let it happen. Aaron's face fell. That's not fair, Em. I'm trying to keep the peace. What do you want me to do? Choose between my wife and my mother? The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Before I could respond, Gloria's voice rang out from inside. Aaron? Emily? Where did you two run off to? The dishes won't do themselves, you know. I closed my eyes, feeling the last of my resolve crumble. When I opened them again, I saw the conflict etched on Aaron's face. In that moment, I realized that our marriage had become a battlefield, with Gloria as the opposing general. And I was losing the war. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, but its warmth did nothing to ease the chill that had settled between Aaron and me since last night's disastrous dinner. I mechanically flipped pancakes, my mind racing with unspoken words and simmering frustrations. Aaron shuffled into the kitchen, his tie askew. Morning, Em, he mumbled, reaching for the coffee pot. I turned to face him, spatula in hand. We need to talk about last night. He sighed, shoulders slumping. Can't we just forget about it? Mom didn't mean... The doorbell's shrill ring cut him off. We exchanged puzzled glances before Aaron went to answer it. Mom? I heard him say, surprise evident in his voice. What are you doing here so early? My stomach dropped as Gloria's voice carried through the house. Can't a mother visit her son without an interrogation? I brought breakfast. I gripped the counter, willing myself to stay calm as they entered the kitchen. Gloria breezed past me, setting a bakery box on the table. Oh, Emily, dear, you didn't need to cook. I brought those croissants Aaron loves. She wrinkled her nose at my pancakes. Though I suppose we could have both. Wouldn't want your efforts to go to waste. I plastered on a smile. How thoughtful of you, Gloria. Aaron cleared his throat. Mom, this is unexpected. Emily and I were just about to... Nonsense, Gloria interrupted, waving a manicured hand. I have wonderful news that simply couldn't wait. She beamed at us both. I've decided to move closer. I found the most darling little house just 3 blocks away. Won't that be lovely? The spatula clattered to the floor. Aaron's face paled as he looked at me, then back to his mother. Mom, that's quite a decision. Are you sure? Gloria's eyes narrowed. Of course I'm sure. Don't you want me nearby? Especially when you two finally decide to give me grandchildren. She turned to me, her gaze sharp. Speaking of which, Emily, have you seen a doctor about your situation? At your age, fertility can be such a concern. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the counter, feeling as if the ground was crumbling beneath my feet. We. Mom, Aaron interjected, his voice strained. Emily and I haven't decided about children yet. It's a big decision. Gloria's laugh was like glass shattering. Oh, Aaron, you're not getting any younger either, you know. And Emily, well... She gave me a pitying look. Tick-tock, dear. Something inside me snapped. That's enough! I shouted, surprising even myself. I will not be bullied in my own home. Our family planning is none of your business, Gloria. The room fell silent. Aaron stared at me, wide-eyed, while Gloria's face flushed an angry red. Well, I never, she huffed. Aaron, are you going to let her speak to me like that? I turned to my husband, silently pleading for support. He looked between us, conflict etched on his face. Mom, Emily's right. We need some space to make these decisions on our own. Gloria's eyes filled with tears. My own son, turning against me, after all I've sacrificed for you. She gathered her purse, heading for the door. I suppose I'll just go home and die alone, shall I? As the door slammed behind her, Aaron slumped into a chair. God, Em, what are we going to do? I sank down beside him, emotionally drained. I don't know, Aaron, but something has to change. I can't live like this anymore. He reached for my hand, his touch hesitant. Maybe we should start trying. For a baby, I mean. It might make things easier with Mom. I jerked my hand away, stung. Is that what you want? To have a child just to appease your mother? Aaron's face crumpled. No, I don't know what I want anymore. As I looked at my husband, the man I loved, but who seemed increasingly like a stranger, a cold realization washed over me. Our marriage was hanging by a thread, and Gloria's scissors were poised to snip it. "Aaron," I said softly, my heart breaking, "we need help. Real help, or I don't think we're going to make it." His silence was deafening, and in that moment, I felt more alone than ever before. The weeks following Gloria's announcement of her impending move blurred together in a haze of tension and unspoken resentment. I found myself withdrawing, spending more time alone in our bedroom, away from Aaron's conflicted gaze and the constant reminders of our crumbling marriage. One particularly gloomy afternoon, I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the pregnancy test in my trembling hands. 2 pink lines stared back at me, undeniable and life-altering. "Emily?" Aaron's voice called from the hallway. "Are you okay? You've been in there a while?" I opened the door, my face a mask of shock. "I'm pregnant," I whispered. Aaron's eyes widened, a mix of emotions flashing across his face. "Are you sure?" I nodded, holding up the test. "I've been feeling off for weeks. I thought it was just stress, but—" He reached for me, then hesitated. "This is... wow. I mean, it's what Mom wanted, right?" His words hit me like a slap. "What your mother wanted? Is that all you can think about?" Aaron backpedaled. "No, I didn't mean—" "Save it," I snapped, pushing past him. "I need some air." I grabbed my keys and stormed out, ignoring Aaron's calls behind me. The cool autumn air hit my face as I walked aimlessly through our neighborhood, my mind reeling. A baby. Our baby. The one thing that should have brought us closer was instead highlighting the chasm between us. Lost in thought, I didn't notice the familiar car pulling up beside me until I heard her voice. "Emily, what on earth are you doing out here alone?" I turned to see Gloria, her face a picture of exaggerated concern. "Just taking a walk," I muttered. She clucked her tongue. "Nonsense. Get in. I'll drive you home." Too exhausted to argue, I slid into the passenger's seat. Gloria chatted away, filling me in on her moving plans and the latest neighborhood gossip. I stared out the window, my hand unconsciously resting on my still flat stomach. "Emily?" Gloria's voice cut through my reverie. "Are you even listening to me?" I turned to face her, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of my secret. "I'm pregnant," I blurted out. Gloria's car swerved slightly before she regained control. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant," I repeated, my voice stronger. "Aaron and I are having a baby." The car screeched to a halt as Gloria pulled over. She turned to me, her eyes gleaming with a mix of triumph and calculation. "Oh, Emily, this is wonderful news. I knew you two would come around eventually. Have you told Aaron yet? Oh, we must start planning immediately. I have so many ideas for the nursery. Of course, I'll need to be there every step of the way to guide you. First-time mothers need all the help they can get, you know." Her words washed over me in a suffocating wave. This moment, which should have been filled with joy and excitement, felt tainted by Gloria's presumptuous planning and barely concealed criticism. "Gloria," I interrupted, my voice shaking, "I appreciate your enthusiasm, but Aaron and I need to process this ourselves first. We'll make our own decisions about the baby." Her face hardened. "Now, Emily, don't be foolish. You clearly need guidance. Why, when I was pregnant with Aaron—" "Stop!" I shouted, surprising us both. "This is not about you, Gloria. This is about me, Aaron, and our child, our family." Gloria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Family? I am family, Emily. More so than you, it seems. Aaron will want me involved, you'll see." As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Aaron. "Where are you? Mom's here, looking for you. She seems upset." I looked up to see we were parked in front of our house, Aaron standing on the porch with a confused expression. Gloria was already out of the car, striding towards him with purpose. "Aaron, darling," she called out. "Emily has the most wonderful news." I scrambled out of the car, my heart pounding. "Gloria, don't—" But it was too late. As I watched Gloria embrace Aaron, whispering in his ear, I saw the future I had imagined for us slipping away. Our joyous announcement, our private celebration, all stolen in an instant. Aaron's eyes met mine over Gloria's shoulder, a mix of confusion, joy, and something else I couldn't quite name. In that moment, I realized that my pregnancy wasn't just the beginning of a new life. It was the catalyst that would either save our marriage or destroy it completely. As my pregnancy progressed, I found myself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The joy of impending motherhood was constantly overshadowed by the growing distance between Aaron and me. Even more surprising was Gloria's sudden change in behavior. "Emily, dear, You simply must put your feet up, Gloria cooed, fluffing a pillow behind me. In my day, we knew the importance of rest for expectant mothers. I blinked in confusion, unused to this new, attentive version of my mother-in-law. Thank you, Gloria. That's thoughtful of you. She beamed, patting my hand. Anything for my grandbaby. Now, let me fetch you some herbal tea. It's excellent for morning sickness. As Gloria bustled off to the kitchen, I caught Aaron's eye. He shrugged, looking as bewildered as I felt. I guess the baby news really changed things, he said, a hint of relief in his voice. I nodded, unsure how to feel about this unexpected turn of events. Part of me was grateful for the reprieve from Gloria's constant criticism, but another part remained wary, waiting for the other shoe to drop. As the weeks passed, Gloria's overbearing attentiveness began to grate on my nerves. She was constantly at our house, offering unsolicited advice and making plans for the baby's future. Meanwhile, Aaron grew increasingly distant, often working late and seeming distracted when he was home. One evening, as I sat alone in the nursery we'd begun to prepare, I heard Aaron's key in the lock. Glancing at the clock, I frowned. It was past 10 p.m., another late night at the office. Aaron called out softly. You still up? I waddled out to the hallway, one hand on my growing belly. Hey, I said, trying to keep the accusation out of my voice. Long day? He nodded, avoiding my eyes. Yeah, big project. Sorry I missed dinner. Again, I added, unable to keep the bitterness from my tone. Aaron sighed, running a hand through his hair. I said I was sorry, What more do you want? I want my husband back, I exploded, months of frustration boiling over. I want the man who used to be excited about our baby, who used to talk to me, who used to. I trailed off, choking back a sob. Aaron's face crumpled. I'm trying. It's just, there's a lot of pressure at work, and with Mom always around. Don't blame this on your mother, I snapped. She may be overbearing, but at least she's here. Where are you, Aaron? Because it sure doesn't feel like you're in this with me. He reached for me, but I stepped back. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my coat and keys. Emily, wait. But I was already out the door, tears blurring my vision as I made my way to the car. I drove aimlessly, eventually finding myself at a small park near our house. Sitting on a bench, I watched young families playing, their laughter a stark contrast to the heaviness in my heart. My phone buzzed insistently. Thinking it was Aaron, I almost ignored it, but something made me look. It was a text from an unknown number. Your husband isn't working late. He's with her again. Lincoln Hotel, room 302. See for yourself. My blood ran cold. With trembling hands, I started the car and drove to the hotel, my mind racing with possibilities, each worse than the last. As I approached room 302, I heard muffled laughter. Aaron's laugh, followed by a woman's voice I didn't recognize. I stood frozen, my hand poised to knock, when suddenly the door swung open. Aaron stood there, his shirt untucked, lipstick on his collar. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of a young woman hastily buttoning her blouse. Our eyes met, and in that moment, my world shattered. Emily, Aaron gasped, his face draining of color. I can explain. But I was already running, one hand protectively cradling my belly, the other wiping away hot tears of betrayal. As I drove home in a daze, one thought crystallized in my mind. I had to protect myself and my baby, no matter the cost. The life I had known was over. Now, I had to figure out how to build a new one from the ashes of betrayal. The days following my discovery of Aaron's infidelity passed in a blur of numbness and disbelief. I wandered our house like a ghost, mechanically going through the motions of daily life while my mind raced with unanswered questions and suppressed rage. Aaron's desperate attempts to explain and apologize fell on deaf ears. I couldn't bear to look at him, let alone listen to his excuses. Gloria, sensing the tension but unaware of its cause, hovered anxiously, her newfound solicitousness now grating on my last nerve. One afternoon, as I sat in the nursery folding tiny onesies, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Meet me at Riverside Cafe at 3 p.m. if you want to know the whole truth. My heart raced. Could this be the same person who had tipped me off about Aaron's affair? Despite my better judgment, I found myself driving to the cafe, curiosity and desperation overriding caution. As I entered, a young woman with sleek blonde hair waved me over. My stomach clenched as I recognized her from the hotel room. Emily, she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. I'm Samantha. Thank you for coming. I sat down stiffly, my hands protectively cradling my belly. Why did you want to meet? Samantha sighed, pushing a folder across the table. Because you deserve to know everything. Aaron's been lying to both of us. With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Inside were photos, receipts, and printed emails documenting Aaron's affair, not just with Samantha, but with multiple women over the past year. He told me he was separated, Samantha explained, her eyes brimming with tears. When I found out about you and the baby, I knew I had to come clean. I stared at the evidence, feeling as if the ground had opened up beneath me. How long have you known? A few weeks, she admitted. I've been gathering evidence. Emily, there's more you need to know. Aaron's been embezzling from his company to fund these affairs. He's in deep trouble, and I'm afraid he might try to pin it on me. My mind reeled. The Aaron I thought I knew, my loving, supportive husband, was a complete stranger. A liar, a cheater, and now a thief. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Samantha reached across the table, hesitating before placing her hand on mine. Because I was wrong to get involved with a married man, and I want to make it right. You need to protect yourself and your baby, Emily. As I drove home, my emotions swung wildly between devastation and fury. How could Aaron do this to us? To our unborn child? And how had I been so blind? Entering our house, I found Aaron and Gloria in the living room, their hushed conversations stopping abruptly at my appearance. Emily, honey? Gloria cooed, her saccharine tone setting my teeth on edge. Where have you been? We've been so worried. I ignored her, fixing my gaze on Aaron. We need to talk. Now. Gloria started to protest, but Aaron cut her off. Mom, please, give us some privacy. As soon as we were alone, I slammed the folder down on the coffee table. Explain this, I hissed. Aaron's face drained of color as he flipped through the contents. I can explain. Explain what? I exploded. How you've been cheating on me for a year, how you've been stealing from your company, how you've lied to me every single day. He reached for me, but I recoiled. Emily, please. I made mistakes, but I love you. We can work this out. I laughed bitterly. Work it out. There's nothing left to work out, Aaron. It's over. You can't mean that, he pleaded. Think about the baby. We're a family. The mention of our child ignited a fierce protectiveness within me. That's exactly what I'm thinking about. Our baby deserves better than a lying, cheating father. Aaron's face hardened. You can't take my child away from me. If you try to leave, I'll fight you for custody. Who do you think the courts will favor, a successful businessman or an unemployed housewife? His threat hung in the air between us, and in that moment, I knew I had to be smarter than him. I couldn't let him know my next move. Forcing tears to my eyes, I softened my voice. You're right, I'm just upset. We should talk about this when we're both calmer. Relief washed over Aaron's face. Of course, Em. We'll figure this out together. As he pulled me into an embrace, my mind was already formulating a plan. I would play the forgiving wife, but in secret I would prepare for war. For the sake of my child, I would take down Aaron and Gloria, no matter the cost. The game had changed, and I was determined to win. The weeks following my discovery of Aaron's betrayal were a masterclass in deception. I played the role of the forgiving wife to perfection, all while secretly preparing my escape. Every gentle touch from Aaron, every sympathetic glance from Gloria only fueled my determination to break free. As my pregnancy progressed, I focused on gathering evidence. Late at night, I combed through financial records, documented Aaron's absences, and built a case that would ensure my freedom and my child's future. The weight of my secret felt crushing at times, but the life growing inside me gave me strength. Then, during a routine checkup, my world shifted again. Mrs. Thompson, the ultrasound technician said, her voice filled with excitement, I have wonderful news. You're having twins. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Twins. 2 precious lives depending on me. As joy and terror warred within me, I realized the stakes had just doubled. Leaving the clinic in a daze, I nearly collided with Gloria, who was waiting in the parking lot. Emily, dear, how was your appointment? She chirped, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. I hesitated, then made a split-second decision. It's twins, I said, watching her reaction carefully. Gloria's face lit up like a Christmas tree. Twins? Oh, this is marvelous. Aaron will be overjoyed. We must start planning immediately. I'll call the country club, booked the perfect baby shower venue, and of course you'll need my help more than ever now. I'll just have to move in to assist with the babies." As Gloria rambled on, making plans for my future, our future, without a second thought to my input, something inside me snapped. The facade I'd carefully maintained for weeks crumbled. "No," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Gloria paused mid-sentence. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I said no," I repeated, louder this time. "You won't be moving in, you won't be planning my baby shower, and you certainly won't be making decisions about my children's future." Gloria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Now, Emily, don't be foolish. You clearly can't handle twins on your own. Aaron and I—" "Aaron?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean the man who's been cheating on me for the past year? The one who's been embezzling from his company to fund his affairs?" Gloria's face paled. "What are you talking about? That's preposterous." I pulled out my phone, showing her the evidence I'd gathered. "It's all true, Gloria. Your perfect son isn't so perfect after all." As Gloria sputtered and denied, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. "I'm leaving him, Gloria. I'm taking my babies and starting a new life, far away from you and Aaron." Gloria's shock quickly turned to rage. "You ungrateful little tramp, after everything we've done for you, you'll never get away with this. We'll fight you for custody. You'll have nothing." Her words hit me like a physical blow, but I stood my ground. "Try it," I hissed. "I have enough evidence to bury Aaron. One word from me, and his career, his reputation, everything will be destroyed." As I turned to leave, Gloria grabbed my arm. "You can't do this to us. To Aaron. He loves you." I wrenched my arm free. "Love, is that what you call lying, cheating, and stealing? No, Gloria, that's not love, and I won't let my children grow up thinking it is." Driving home, my emotions swung wildly between elation and despair. The knowledge that I was carrying twins, two precious lives depending on me, filled me with a fierce, protective love. But the reality of my situation, a failing marriage, a deceitful husband, and a vindictive mother-in-law, threatened to overwhelm me. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Aaron's car. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. I had to tell him about the twins, had to gauge his reaction. It would be the final test, the moment that would determine whether there was anything left to salvage or if I needed to accelerate my plans to leave. With trembling hands, I opened the front door, the weight of my future and my children's future heavy on my shoulders. Whatever happened next would change everything. There was no turning back now. The confrontation with Aaron about the twins had been the final straw. His initial joy quickly morphed into panic about finances and how this would affect his freedom. In that moment, I knew there was no future for us. With shaking hands, I packed a small bag and drove to my parents' house, tears blurring my vision the entire way. Mom opened the door, her smile fading as she took in my disheveled appearance. "Emily, sweetheart, what's wrong?" I collapsed into her arms, sobs racking my body. Dad appeared behind her, his face etched with concern. They ushered me inside, and through broken sobs, I poured out the whole sordid tale. Aaron's affairs, the embezzlement, Gloria's manipulations, and finally the twins. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry. We had no idea." Dad's face darkened with anger. "That son of a— I'll kill him." I shook my head vehemently. "No, Dad, I need to handle this myself, for the babies." They exchanged a worried glance before Mom asked, "What are you going to do?" Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself. "I'm going to divorce him, after the twins are born." The words hung heavy in the air. My parents, shocked into silence, simply held me as I cried. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. My parents rallied around me, helping me contact lawyers and make plans for the future. Aaron called incessantly, alternating between tearful apologies and angry threats. I let them all go to voicemail, focusing instead on my health and the babies growing inside me. As my due date approached, the stress began to take its toll. My blood pressure spiked and the doctor ordered bed rest. Confined to my childhood bedroom, I felt like a prisoner in my own body, my mind racing with worries about the future. One afternoon, as I lay trying to nap, I heard raised voices downstairs. Curious, I crept to the top of the stairs, my heart pounding as I recognized the voices. "How dare you show up here?" Dad's voice boomed. "After what you've done to our daughter." "Please, Mr. Johnson," Aaron pleaded. "I just want to talk to Emily, to make things right." There's nothing to make right, Mom interjected, her usually gentle voice hard as steel. You've done enough damage. Leave before we call the police. You can't keep me from my children, Aaron shouted. I have rights. I gripped the banister, my knees weak. How dare he? After everything he'd done, he thought he had rights? Suddenly, a sharp pain ripped through my abdomen. I gasped, doubling over. Another pain followed, more intense than the first. Mom, I called out, my voice strained. Dad. The arguing voices below fell silent. Then a flurry of footsteps on the stairs. Emily? Mom's worried face appeared. Oh, God, are you in labor? I nodded, unable to speak through the pain. Dad appeared behind her side, his face pale. I'm calling an ambulance, he said, pulling out his phone. No. Aaron's voice came from behind them. I'll drive. It'll be faster. For a moment we all froze, the tension palpable. Then another contraction hit, and I cried out in pain. Fine, Dad growled, but I'm coming with you. The drive to the hospital was a blur of pain and fear. Aaron kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, his face a mask of worry and guilt. Dad sat beside me in the back seat, holding my hand and murmuring words of encouragement. As we pulled up to the emergency entrance, a terrifying thought struck me. What if Aaron tried to take the babies? What if he and Gloria conspired to keep them from me? Panic seized me, making it hard to breathe. Dad, I gasped. Don't let him near the babies. Promise me. Dad's eyes met mine, understanding dawning in them. He nodded solemnly. I promise, sweetheart. He won't get near them. As the nurses wheeled me into the delivery room, I caught one last glimpse of Aaron's face, a mixture of longing, regret, and something that looked almost like determination. In that moment, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. The doors swung shut behind me, and I steeled myself for what was to come. My children's future hung in the balance, and I was determined to fight with everything I had to protect them, no matter the cost. 3 months after the twins' birth, I stood at the front door of what was once my home, my heart pounding. Dad waited in the car with the babies, ready to intervene if needed. With a deep breath, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet as I made my way to the bedroom, filling a suitcase with my remaining belongings. As I reached for a photo album on the top shelf, a stack of papers tumbled down. Curious, I picked them up, my blood running cold as I realized what they were. More evidence of Aaron's affairs and financial misdeeds. Emily? Aaron's voice startled me. I spun around to see him and Gloria in the doorway, their faces a mix of surprise and anger. What are you doing here? Gloria demanded, her eyes narrowing as she spotted the suitcase. I straightened my spine, clutching the papers. I'm getting my things. I'm leaving, Aaron, for good this time. Aaron's face darkened. You can't take my children away from me. I won't let you. Your children? I laughed bitterly. The ones you've barely seen since they were born? The ones you were ready to abandon when you found out I was having twins? Gloria gasped, turning to Aaron. What is she talking about? I held up the papers. Why don't you ask your perfect son about his affairs, or about the money he's been embezzling from his company? Aaron lunged forward, trying to snatch the papers, but I was quicker. Emily, you don't understand. I can explain. Explain what? I shouted. Years of pent-up frustration pouring out. How you lied to me, cheated on me, made me feel worthless in my own home. Gloria's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little... No, I cut her off. I'm done being silent, done being the perfect, obedient wife. I'm taking my children and starting a new life, away from your manipulation and Aaron's lies. Aaron's demeanor suddenly changed, his voice turning cold. If you walk out that door, I'll destroy you. I'll take the twins, ruin your reputation. You'll have nothing. For a moment, fear gripped me. Then I remembered the strength I'd found in myself, the love I had for my children. I stood taller, meeting his gaze. Try it, I said, my voice steady. I have enough evidence to bury you, Aaron. One word from me, and your career, your reputation, everything you care about, will be gone. Gloria stepped forward, her voice sickly sweet. Now, Emily, let's not be hasty. We're family. We can work this out. I turned to her, years of resentment bubbling to the surface. Family? Is that what you call this? You've done nothing but undermine and belittle me from the day I married your son. Well, it ends now. I grabbed my suitcase, pushing past them towards the door. Aaron grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. You can't do this to me, he hissed. In that moment, something inside me snapped. I wrenched my arm free and slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed through the room, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. "Watch me," I said, my voice low and dangerous. As I walked out the front door, I heard Gloria wailing and Aaron calling my name. But I didn't look back. Dad was waiting, a proud smile on his face as he helped me into the car. Looking at my sleeping twins in the back seat, a wave of peace washed over me. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years I felt truly free. "Ready to go home?" Dad asked gently. I nodded, a small smile playing on my lips. "More than ready." As we drove away, I caught a final glimpse of Aaron and Gloria in the rearview mirror, standing shell-shocked on the front porch. The sight that once would have filled me with dread now only strengthened my resolve. I had survived their manipulation, their lies, and their attempts to break me. I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to create a beautiful life for myself and my children. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was no longer a victim. I was a survivor, a fighter, and a mother who would move mountains for her children. As we turned the corner, leaving my old life behind, I felt a surge of excitement for what lay ahead. The journey wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face it head-on. After all, I had fought the hardest battle of my life and won. Whatever challenges came next, I knew I had the strength to overcome them. The road stretched out before us, full of promise and possibility. And for the first time in years, I couldn't wait to see where it would lead. The familiar aroma of freshly baked bread wafted through the cozy bakery, a comforting scent that had greeted me every morning since childhood. As I stepped behind the counter to help my father, Jack, prepare for the day's rush, a pang of nostalgia tugged at my heart. This bakery, a cherished legacy passed down through generations, was more than just a business. It was a sanctuary, a place where the warmth of community and family intertwined. "Morning, sweetheart." Dad greeted me with a warm smile, his hands already dusted with flour from the early morning baking. "Ready for another busy day?" I nodded, tying my apron strings. "You know I am. The Harris Bakery wouldn't be the same without us." Dad chuckled, his eyes crinkling with pride. "Your mother would be so proud of you, Linda. She poured her heart into this place, and now it's our turn to keep her spirit alive." Memories of Mom's infectious laughter and her unwavering dedication to the bakery flooded my mind. Even after she passed away when I was just a teenager, her presence lingered in every nook and cranny, a constant reminder of the love and hard work that built this sanctuary. As the morning rush began, a steady stream of familiar faces filled the bakery, each greeted with a warm smile and a heartfelt exchange. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow from down the street, beamed as I handed her a freshly baked blueberry muffin, her favorite. Little Timmy, the rambunctious kid from the neighborhood, bounced excitedly as Dad slipped him an extra chocolate chip cookie, winking conspiratorially. These were the moments that made every early morning and late night worth it. The connections forged, the sense of belonging that transcended mere transactions. In a world that often felt cold and impersonal, our little bakery was a haven, a place where people could find solace in the simple pleasures of life. As the day wore on, my thoughts drifted to Mark, my husband of 2 years. We had met at the office where we both worked, and from the moment our eyes locked, I knew there was something special between us. His kind eyes and gentle demeanor had captured my heart, and I couldn't help but imagine a future filled with love and laughter by his side. Yet, even in the midst of our blissful union, a shadow loomed, the ever-present specter of Mark's mother, Evelyn. A woman of wealth and social standing, she had never approved of my humble roots or the bakery that meant so much to me. Her cutting remarks and disapproving glances had become a constant source of tension, driving a wedge between Mark and me. "Linda, if you truly loved me, you'd stand up to her." Mark's voice echoed in my mind, choked with frustration, his eyes pleading while my heart trembled between loyalty to my husband and fear of his mother's wrath. As the day drew to a close, and the last customer left with a warm pastry and a grateful smile, I found myself torn between the sanctuary of the bakery and the turmoil brewing in my personal life. But one thing was certain. I would not let Evelyn's disdain diminish the legacy my parents had built or the love that Mark and I shared. With a deep breath, I steeled my resolve, determined to find a way to bridge the divide and protect the things that mattered most. The sound of Evelyn's heels clicking against the hardwood floor announced her arrival before I even saw her. Mark tensed beside me, his hand gripping mine a little tighter as his mother swept into the living room, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer dress a stark contrast to our modest home. "Linda, darling." Evelyn greeted me with a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I hope you're not planning on wearing something so plain for the wedding." I swallowed hard, feeling the familiar prickle of insecurity creep up my spine. "It's just a simple ceremony, Evelyn, nothing too extravagant." Her perfectly arched eyebrow raised ever so slightly, and I could practically hear the disdain dripping from her words. "Surely you don't expect my son to settle for a backyard affair. This is a Bryant wedding, after all." Mark shifted uncomfortably beside me, but before he could speak, Evelyn continued, "I've taken the liberty of booking the country club for the reception. It's a venue befitting our family's stature." My heart sank as I realized she had once again steamrolled over our plans, imposing her vision without regard for our wishes. Mark remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor, and I knew he wouldn't challenge his mother's decision. Evelyn's critical eye swept over our modest living room, her nose wrinkling ever so slightly. "I must say, Linda, I had hoped my son would have chosen a more suitable partner, one who could appreciate the finer things in life." Her words cut deep, striking at the very core of my insecurities. I had always taken pride in my humble upbringing and the values instilled by my father's bakery: hard work, community, and a deep appreciation for the simple pleasures in life. But in Evelyn's world, those virtues held no value. "Mother, that's enough." Mark finally spoke up, his voice strained, but Evelyn merely waved him off, her attention already shifting to the next item on her agenda. As she droned on about guest lists and seating arrangements, I felt myself retreating inward, my confidence withering under the weight of her constant criticism. Mark's hand remained limp in mine, a silent acknowledgement of his inability, or unwillingness, to stand up to his mother's overbearing presence. Later that evening, as Mark and I prepared for bed, the tension between us was palpable. I could see the conflict etched on his face, the struggle between his love for me and his deep-rooted fear of defying his mother's wishes. "Linda," he began, his voice heavy with resignation, "I know my mother can be difficult, but she means well in her own way." I fought back the bitter laugh that threatened to escape my lips. Evelyn's actions spoke louder than any well-intentioned words ever could. Her constant belittling, her disregard for our desires, and her relentless pursuit of social status had cast a dark shadow over what should have been one of the happiest times of our lives. "Does she, Mark?" I asked, my voice trembling with barely contained frustration. "Because from where I'm standing, it seems like she's more concerned with appearances than our happiness." Mark's shoulders slumped, and I could see the internal battle raging within him. In that moment, I realized that no matter how much he loved me, a part of him would always be tethered to his mother's expectations, her approval a coveted prize he could never quite attain. As I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, a seed of resentment took root within me. Evelyn's constant undermining had not only threatened my self-worth, but had also driven a wedge between Mark and me. I knew then that I couldn't simply stand by and let her dictate the course of our lives. For the sake of our marriage and my own sense of dignity, I would have to find a way to confront her toxic influence, even if it meant risking the wrath of the formidable Evelyn Bryant. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the house, and I knew without even answering that it was Evelyn, her perfectly manicured nails rapping impatiently against the doorframe. Mark shot me an apologetic glance as he rose to greet his mother, his shoulders already tensing in anticipation of her critique. "Linda, darling," Evelyn breezed in, her gaze sweeping over our modest living room with thinly veiled disdain. "I simply had to come by and discuss the guest list for the wedding." Before I could respond, she thrust a thick binder into my hands, the pages overflowing with names and addresses. "I've taken the liberty of inviting a few of my dearest friends and associates. After all, this is a Bryant wedding, and we must maintain a certain level of decorum." My heart sank as I flipped through the pages, recognizing none of the names, a veritable who's who of Evelyn's elite social circle. Gone was any semblance of the intimate gathering Mark and I had envisioned. replaced by a grandiose affair designed to showcase Evelyn's status and connections. Evelyn, I appreciate your input, but Mark and I had hoped for something a bit more personal, I began, my voice wavering slightly under her steely gaze. Nonsense, dear, she waved her hand dismissively. This is a once-in-a-lifetime event. We simply must do it properly. Mark shifted uncomfortably beside me, his silence a deafening testament to his unwillingness to challenge his mother's authority. I could feel the frustration building within me, a simmering resentment at the way Evelyn steamrolled over our wishes, treating our wedding as a mere extension of her own social ambitions. But what about my family and friends? I pressed on, my voice growing stronger. Shouldn't they be included as well? Evelyn's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched ever so slightly, and I could practically hear the disdain dripping from her words. Surely you don't expect to invite those common folk to such an esteemed occasion. The insult stung like a slap in the face, and I felt Mark tense beside me, his jaw clenching as he struggled to find the words to defend me. But before he could speak, Evelyn continued, her tone laced with condescension. Darling, I'm only trying to ensure that this wedding reflects the Bryant family's standing in society. We can't have your little bakery friends cluttering up the guest list, now can we? The air seemed to crackle with tension as her words hung between us, and I could feel the anger bubbling up within me, threatening to boil over. How dare she dismiss the very people who had been my rock, my support system, throughout my life? The loyal customers and cherished friends who had celebrated my triumphs and comforted me in my darkest moments, reduced to mere clutter in Evelyn's eyes. That's enough, Mother, Mark finally spoke up, his voice strained but resolute. Linda's family and friends are just as important as yours. This is our wedding, and we'll invite whoever we choose. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her perfectly painted lips pursing in disapproval. Mark, darling, you can't be serious. These people are beneath us, and their presence will only serve to diminish the grandeur of the occasion. The words hung in the air like a slap, and I could feel the anger and hurt radiating from Mark as he struggled to maintain his composure. In that moment, I realized the true depth of Evelyn's disdain, not just for me, but for everything and everyone that didn't conform to her elitist ideals. As Evelyn continued to prattle on about seating arrangements and floral arrangements, her voice droning on like a persistent buzz, I felt a newfound resolve taking root within me. This was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, a celebration of love and commitment, but Evelyn had twisted it into a twisted display of social climbing and one-upmanship. I would not stand idly by and let her trample over our dreams, our values, any longer. If Mark couldn't find the strength to stand up to his mother, then I would have to take matters into my own hands. The seeds of a plan began to germinate in my mind, a silent vow to reclaim our wedding and our lives from Evelyn's toxic grip. The familiar chime of the bakery's bell greeted me as I stepped inside, the comforting aroma of freshly baked bread instantly calming my frayed nerves. As I made my way behind the counter, exchanging warm greetings with the regulars, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. This was my sanctuary, a place where Evelyn's toxic influence held no sway. Everything all right, sweetheart? Dad's voice broke through my reverie, his brow furrowed with concern. You seem a bit distracted today. I forced a smile, not wanting to burden him with the weight of my troubles. Just wedding stress, I replied, hoping the half-truth would suffice. Dad's expression softened, and he reached out to give my hand a gentle squeeze. Don't let that woman get you down, Linda. This is supposed to be a happy time for you and Mark. I nodded, swallowing the lump that had formed in my throat. If only he knew the extent of Evelyn's meddling, her relentless efforts to mold our wedding into a gaudy display of her own social standing. As the day wore on, and the familiar faces of our loyal customers streamed in and out, I found myself seeking solace in their warm smiles and friendly banter. These were the people who truly mattered, the ones who had been there for me through thick and thin, long before Evelyn's toxic presence had entered our lives. It was then that a seed of an idea began to take root in my mind. If Evelyn was determined to turn our wedding into a spectacle for her elite social circle, then perhaps it was time to remind her of the true power of community. the unbreakable bonds forged through shared experiences and unwavering support. That evening, as I closed up the bakery, I made a series of discreet phone calls, reaching out to those I knew I could trust implicitly. One by one, they agreed to meet me in secret, their voices brimming with concern and a shared determination to stand by my side. The following night, I found myself in the cozy living room of Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow who had been a fixture at the bakery for as long as I could remember. Around me sat a small but formidable group, fellow customers, neighbors, and friends who had become like family over the years. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice trembling slightly with a mixture of nerves and resolve. As you know, Evelyn has been difficult, to say the least, when it comes to the wedding plans. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, and I could see the shared frustration etched on their faces. They had all borne witness to Evelyn's disdain, her dismissive attitude toward the very community that had nurtured and supported me throughout my life. "She wants to turn our wedding into a gaudy display of wealth and status," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "But I won't let her diminish the love and support that you've all shown me over the years." Mrs. Thompson reached out and patted my hand, her eyes shining with determination. "We're with you, dear," she assured me. "That woman doesn't know the first thing about true family and community." One by one, they pledged their support, offering ideas and strategies to counter Evelyn's elitist machinations. From securing a prime location for the ceremony to rallying the local businesses to provide their services, a plan began to take shape. A plan to remind Evelyn that true strength lies not in wealth or social standing, but in the unbreakable bonds of community. As the meeting drew to a close, and I looked around at the faces of those who had become my chosen family, I felt a newfound sense of resolve. Evelyn might wield her wealth and influence like a weapon, but she had underestimated the power of genuine love and loyalty. The battle lines had been drawn, and I was determined to emerge victorious, not just for myself, but for the enduring spirit of community that had sustained me through every challenge life had thrown my way. The sound of Evelyn's shrill voice cut through the air like a knife, shattering the tentative peace that had settled over our weekly family dinner. "Honestly, Linda, must you insist on serving such pedestrian fare? One would think you'd have learned a thing or two about proper hosting by now." I felt the familiar sting of her words, the disdain dripping from every syllable as she eyed the simple spread of homemade dishes before her. Dad's jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the table, but before he could respond, Evelyn continued her tirade. "And this bakery," she sneered, her gaze sweeping over the quaint decor that had once filled me with such pride. "Surely you don't expect my son to be associated with such a common establishment." The air seemed to crackle with tension, and I could feel Mark's discomfort radiating from beside me. He opened his mouth as if to defend me, but the words never came, a silent testament to the hold his mother still had over him. "That's enough, Evelyn," Dad's voice boomed, startling us all with its sudden ferocity. "This bakery has been a cornerstone of our community for generations, and I'll not have you disrespect it, or my daughter, under my own roof." Evelyn's perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched in surprise, her lips pursing into a thin line of disapproval. "Jack, darling, I'm merely trying to help Linda understand the expectations that come with being part of our family. Surely you can see how her humble beginnings might be a liability." The words hung in the air like a noxious cloud, and I could feel the anger and hurt radiating from Dad's every pore. This was more than just a petty insult. It was a direct attack on the very values and traditions that had sustained our family for generations. A liability? Dad's voice trembled with barely contained fury. "The only liability here is your complete lack of respect and decency. Linda is a kind, hard-working woman who embodies the true spirit of family and community, something you clearly know nothing about." Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the tabletop in a display of barely restrained irritation. "How dare you speak to me in such a manner? I am merely trying to guide Linda toward a more refined way of life." "Refined?" Dad scoffed, his laughter tinged with bitterness. "You call belittling and demeaning others refined? Your idea of refinement is nothing more than a hollow facade, a desperate attempt to cling to a false sense of superiority. The words seemed to hang in the air, a palpable silence descending over the room as Evelyn's face flushed with indignation. For a moment I thought she might storm out, her pride too wounded to endure such a scathing rebuke. But then her expression hardened and she turned her icy gaze towards me. "Linda, darling, surely you don't agree with this outburst." Her voice was sickly sweet, laced with a subtle threat. "You know how important it is to maintain a certain level of decorum, especially with our upcoming nuptials." I felt the weight of her expectation pressing down on me, the unspoken demand that I choose between my father and the woman who would soon be my mother-in-law. But as I looked into Dad's eyes, shining with a fierce determination to protect me, I knew there was no choice to be made. "Evelyn," I began, my voice steady despite the turmoil raging within me. "This bakery, this community, is a part of who I am, and if you can't respect that, then perhaps it's time you reevaluated your priorities." The words seemed to hang in the air, a silent challenge to the woman who had made it her mission to undermine and belittle everything I held dear. And in that moment, as Evelyn's face contorted with barely contained rage, I knew that the battle lines had been drawn. A silent vow to reclaim my dignity and protect the legacy that had sustained my family for generations. As the evening drew to a close and Evelyn swept out in a flurry of indignation, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The seeds of revenge had taken root. A quiet determination to turn the tables on the woman who had tried so desperately to break me. And with the unwavering support of my father and my community, I knew that victory was within reach. The morning of our wedding dawned with a palpable tension in the air, like the calm before a storm. As I slipped into my simple yet elegant gown, I couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation mingling with the excitement. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, a celebration of love and commitment, but Evelyn's looming presence cast a dark shadow over the proceedings. As I stepped out of the bridal suite, I was greeted by a flurry of activity. Evelyn's elite friends milling about, their designer dresses and expensive jewelry a stark contrast to the warm, familiar faces of my own community. It was as if two worlds had collided, and I found myself caught in the middle, torn between the opulence Evelyn craved and the genuine love and support that had sustained me throughout my life. "Linda, darling, you look absolutely radiant," Evelyn gushed, sweeping over to me with a forced smile plastered on her perfectly made-up face. "Although perhaps we could have done something a bit more elaborate with your hair." I fought back the urge to roll my eyes, reminding myself that today was about more than just appeasing Evelyn's whims. This was my day, our day, and I would not let her dampen the joy and significance of the occasion. As the ceremony began, I felt a sense of calm wash over me, bolstered by the presence of my father and the familiar faces of our loyal customers and friends. These were the people who truly mattered, the ones who had been there for me through thick and thin, long before Evelyn's toxic influence had entered our lives. And then, as if sensing my newfound resolve, Dad took the stage, his eyes shining with a mixture of pride and determination. "Friends, family, we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of two remarkable individuals," he began, his voice ringing out with a clarity and strength that belied his years. "But more than that, we are here to honor the enduring spirit of community, the bonds that transcend mere bloodlines and social status, forged through shared experiences, unwavering support, and a deep appreciation for the simple joys in life." I could see Evelyn's perfectly sculpted eyebrows knit together in confusion, her lips pursing ever so slightly as Dad's words washed over her like a gentle rebuke. "Linda and Mark have chosen to embark on this journey together, not just as husband and wife, but as partners in a legacy that stretches back generations," Dad continued, his gaze sweeping over the assembled crowd. "A legacy built on the values of hard work, resilience, and an unwavering commitment to those who truly matter, the people who have stood by their side through good times and bad." As Dad's speech reached its crescendo, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude swell within me. This was more than just a wedding ceremony. It was a defiant declaration of the strength and resilience that had sustained my family and our community for generations, a powerful rebuke to Evelyn's shallow obsession with status and wealth. And as I turned to face Mark, his eyes shining with a newfound understanding and respect, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, bolstered by the love and support of those who truly mattered, and the unbreakable spirit of community that had brought us to this moment. The reception was in full swing, the air thick with the mingled scents of expensive perfumes and the familiar aroma of freshly baked treats from the Harris Bakery. As I made my way through the crowd, exchanging warm embraces and heartfelt congratulations, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and vindication wash over me. Despite Evelyn's best efforts to turn our wedding into a gaudy display of wealth and status, the genuine love and support of my community had shone through, overshadowing her hollow network of social climbers. Their presence was a tangible reminder of the true strength that lay in the bonds of family and community, bonds that transcended mere bloodlines and social standing. As I caught sight of Evelyn, her perfectly coiffed hair and designer dress, a stark contrast to the warmth and simplicity that surrounded her, I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation. She had been uncharacteristically subdued during the ceremony, no doubt stung by Dad's powerful speech and the outpouring of affection from our guests. But I knew better than to expect her to retreat quietly into the night. Evelyn was a woman accustomed to getting her way, and she would not relinquish her grip on power and control without a fight. Sure enough, as I approached the head table, her eyes narrowed, and she rose to her feet, a hush falling over the room as she cleared her throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment." I felt Mark tense beside me, his hand tightening around mine as we braced ourselves for the onslaught. "As many of you know, I have had my reservations about this union," Evelyn began, her voice dripping with disdain. "Not because I harbor any ill will toward Linda, of course, but because I fear she may not be suited for the lifestyle that comes with being part of our family." A murmur rippled through the crowd, and I could feel the eyes of my community members burning into Evelyn, their silent support bolstering my resolve. "You see, the Bryant name carries with it a certain level of prestige, a certain expectation," Evelyn continued, her gaze sweeping over the assembled guests. "And while I'm sure Linda's humble upbringing has instilled in her a certain set of values, one can't help but wonder if she truly understands the responsibilities that come with our station." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and I could feel the anger and hurt radiating from Dad's every pore. But before he could respond, before the fury that had been simmering within me could boil over, a voice rang out from the crowd, clear, strong, and unwavering. "With all due respect, Mrs. Bryant," Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow who had been a fixture at the bakery for as long as I could remember, stepped forward, her eyes shining with a fierce determination. "It seems to me that you're the one who doesn't understand the true meaning of family and community." A hush fell over the room as Evelyn's perfectly sculpted eyebrows knit together in confusion, her lips pursing ever so slightly. "Linda may not have been born into your world of wealth and privilege," Mrs. Thompson continued, her voice carrying a weight and authority that belied her years. "But she has something far more valuable, a deep appreciation for the bonds that truly matter, the ones forged through shared experiences, unwavering support, and a genuine love for the simple joys in life." One by one, the other members of our community stepped forward, their voices rising in a chorus of support, each sharing their own stories and memories of the warmth and kindness that Linda had brought into their lives. As the testimonials washed over me, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude swell within my chest. These were the people who had stood by me through thick and thin, who had seen me not just as a customer or a neighbor, but as a cherished member of their extended family. And as I turned to face Mark, his eyes shining with a newfound understanding and respect, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, bolstered by the love and support of those who truly mattered and the unbreakable spirit of community that had brought us to this moment. "Mother," Mark's voice rang out, clear and resolute, cutting through the din of the crowd. "I love you, and I will always be grateful for the opportunities you've provided me. But Linda is my wife, my partner, and my future, and if you cannot accept and respect that, then I'm afraid our paths must diverge." A A collective gasp rippled through the room as Mark's words sank in, and I could see the color drain from Evelyn's face, her carefully constructed facade crumbling before our very eyes. "From this day forward, I will be taking Linda's surname," Mark declared, his hand tightening around mine in a silent vow of solidarity. "And I will embrace the values and traditions that have sustained her family for generations, values that you, regrettably, seem to have lost sight of." In that moment, as Evelyn stood frozen in stunned silence, I felt a sense of liberation wash over me. The shackles of her toxic influence had been broken, and I was free to embrace the life I had always dreamed of. A life filled with love, laughter, and the unwavering support of a community that had become more than just neighbors, but a cherished extension of my family. The months following our wedding passed in a whirlwind of change and adjustment, but through it all, a sense of peace and contentment settled over our lives. With Evelyn's toxic influence finally banished, Mark and I were free to embrace the values and traditions that had sustained my family for generations. Gone were the days of walking on eggshells, constantly second-guessing ourselves to appease Evelyn's elitist whims. Instead, we found ourselves welcomed with open arms into the warm embrace of my community, their unwavering support and genuine affection a balm for the wounds inflicted by years of emotional turmoil. As we settled into our new life together, Mark threw himself wholeheartedly into the daily operations of the Harris Bakery, his natural affinity for numbers and business acumen proving invaluable as we explored ways to expand our reach and share our beloved treats with a wider audience. "You know, Linda," he mused one evening as we pored over the latest sales figures, a contented smile playing on his lips, "I never truly appreciated the magic of this place until now." I couldn't help but chuckle, remembering the disdain that had once clouded his perception, a byproduct of Evelyn's relentless pursuit of status and wealth. "Well, I'm just glad you finally saw the light." Mark's gaze softened, and he reached across the table to take my hand in his. "It's more than that," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This bakery, this community, it's a living, breathing embodiment of everything that truly matters in life. Love, loyalty, and the simple joys that money can't buy." As the weeks turned into months, the news of Evelyn's public humiliation and Mark's defiant stance spread like wildfire through her elite social circles. One by one, her so-called friends and associates began to distance themselves, their shallow allegiances crumbling in the face of her tarnished reputation. Meanwhile, our little bakery thrived, buoyed by the unwavering support of our community and the influx of curious newcomers drawn in by the tantalizing aromas and the promise of a warm, welcoming atmosphere. Dad, ever the visionary, saw an opportunity to expand our reach even further, and with Mark's business savvy and my deep-rooted knowledge of the bakery's operations, we embarked on an ambitious plan to open a second location in the heart of the city. The grand opening was a true celebration of our journey, a testament to the resilience and determination that had carried us through the darkest of times. As the ribbon was cut and the doors swung open, a sea of familiar faces greeted us, their smiles and well wishes a poignant reminder of the unbreakable bonds that had sustained us. In the years that followed, our little bakery empire continued to grow, each new location a beacon of hope and community in a world that often felt cold and impersonal. And through it all, Mark and I remained steadfast in our commitment to the values that had brought us together: hard work, loyalty, and an unwavering appreciation for the simple pleasures in life. As I watched Dad play with our children in the warm, golden light of the bakery's kitchen, their laughter mingling with the familiar scents of freshly baked bread and sugary confections, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. This was the life I had always dreamed of, a life filled with love, laughter, and the unwavering support of a community that had become more than just neighbors, but a cherished extension of our family. And in those quiet moments as the world outside faded into the background, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, bolstered by the strength and resilience that had carried us through the darkest of times and the enduring spirit of community that had become the very foundation of our lives. "Ellen, I can't keep this to myself any longer. Harold has been seeing someone else. I saw them at the cafe today." Miriam's words hit me like a punch to the gut as we sat in my living room, sipping tea. My hands trembled, nearly spilling the hot liquid onto my lap. I stared at her, my mind reeling. What do you mean, seeing someone else? That can't be true. Harold would never... My voice trailed off as doubt crept in. The late nights at work, the secretive phone calls, the distant behavior, it all started to make a sickening kind of sense. Miriam reached out and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry, Ellen. I debated whether to tell you, but I couldn't bear the thought of you being in the dark. You deserve to know the truth. Tears welled up in my eyes as the reality sank in. After 35 years of marriage, countless sacrifices, and unwavering dedication to our family, Harold had betrayed me. The man I had built a life with, the father of my children, had been lying to me, sneaking around behind my back. What do I do now, Miriam? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. How could he do this to me, to our family? Miriam pulled me into a tight embrace. You're strong, Ellen. You'll get through this. And you have me, Claire, and Harold Jr. We'll support you every step of the way. I nodded, wiping away the tears that now flowed freely down my cheeks. A wave of emotions crashed over me. Shock, anger, hurt, and a deep sense of betrayal. How could I have been so blind? The signs were there, but I had chosen to ignore them, to believe in the illusion of our perfect marriage. As I sat there, my mind raced with questions. Who was this other woman? How long had it been going on? Did our children know? The thought of Claire and Harold Jr. finding out about their father's infidelity broke my heart all over again. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I need to confront him. Miriam, I need to hear the truth from his own lips. Miriam nodded. Of course, Ellen. But remember, you don't have to do this alone. I'm here for you, no matter what. I managed a weak smile, grateful for her unwavering support. Thank you, Miriam. I don't know what I would do without you. As we finished our tea, a newfound determination began to rise within me. I couldn't let Harold's betrayal define me. I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for my children. They deserved a mother who fought for the truth, who stood up for herself and her family. I glanced at the clock, knowing Harold would be home soon. The confrontation loomed ahead and my stomach churned with a mix of dread and anticipation, but I knew I had to face it head on. I couldn't live a lie any longer. With Miriam by my side, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. I would demand answers, uncover the truth, and fight for the life I deserved. Harold's secrets would be brought to light, and I would emerge stronger, no matter how painful the journey might be. As the front door clicked open, signaling Harold's arrival, I took a deep breath and rose to my feet. It was time to confront the dark secrets that had been lurking in the shadows of our marriage. The truth would set me free, even if it shattered everything I had once believed in. The tension in the kitchen was palpable as I waited for Harold to come home. The ticking of the clock seemed to echo in my ears, each second dragging on for an eternity. When the front door finally opened, I steeled myself, ready to confront the man I had once trusted with my entire life. Harold walked in, his eyes widening as he saw me standing there, arms crossed. "Ellen, what's going on?" "We need to talk, Harold." My voice was steady, masking the turmoil within. "I know about the affair." His face paled, and he took a step back. "What are you talking about? There's no affair. You're being ridiculous." Anger flared within me. "Don't lie to me, Harold. Miriam saw you with her at the cafe. How could you do this to me, to our family?" Harold's expression shifted from shock to defensiveness. "Miriam? She's always been jealous of our marriage. You can't believe everything she says." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "Stop making excuses, Harold. I've seen the signs for months now, the late nights, the secretive phone calls. I just didn't want to believe it." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his voice. "Do you really think I want to come home to this every day? To your constant nagging and suspicions?" His words cut deep, but I refused to back down. "So that justifies betraying our marriage vows? Betraying the life we've built together?" Our voices grew louder, the argument escalating. Claire and Harold Jr. emerged from their rooms, concern etched on their faces as they witnessed the unfolding drama. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" Claire asked, her eyes darting between us. I took a deep breath, trying to compose myself. "Your father has something he needs to tell you." Harold glared at me before turning to our children. "It's nothing. Your mother is just overreacting, as usual." Claire stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Harold. "Dad, please, just tell us the truth." The room fell silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on us all. Harold's shoulders slumped, and he let out a heavy sigh. "Fine. I've been seeing someone else, but it's not what you think." Tears streamed down my face as the confirmation of his infidelity hit me like a tidal wave. Claire gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, while Harold Jr. stood frozen, disbelief etched on his features. "How could you, Dad?" Claire's voice trembled with a mix of anger and hurt. "How could you do this to Mom, to our family?" Harold's defensive demeanor crumbled under the scrutiny of our children. "It just happened. I never meant to hurt anyone." I wiped away my tears, a newfound strength rising within me. "But you did, Harold. You hurt all of us, and now you have to face the consequences." He looked at me, a flicker of fear in his eyes. "What do you mean, consequences?" "I want a divorce, Harold. I won't live a lie anymore. I deserve better than this, and so do our children." The room fell silent once more, the weight of my words sinking in. Harold's face contorted with a mix of emotions, anger, regret, and perhaps even a hint of relief. Claire stepped forward, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. "We're here for you, Mom. You don't have to go through this alone." I nodded, grateful for her unwavering support. Harold Jr. remained silent, his eyes downcast, processing the revelation of his father's betrayal. As the initial shock subsided, a flurry of questions and accusations filled the air. The cracks in our family's foundation had been exposed, and the road ahead would be far from easy. But in that moment, I knew I had made the right decision. I refused to be a victim any longer. I would face the challenges head-on, with the love and support of my children by my side. The confrontation had opened a new chapter in our lives, one filled with uncertainty and pain. But it was also a chapter of truth, of reclaiming my dignity and self-worth. As I looked into Harold's eyes, I saw a man I no longer recognized. The love and trust we had once shared had been shattered, replaced by the bitter reality of his deceit. There would be no turning back now. The journey ahead would be difficult, but I was ready to fight for the life I deserved, free from the shadows of betrayal. In the aftermath of the confrontation with Harold, I found myself sitting in the living room, my mind reeling from the events that had transpired. The weight of his betrayal pressed down on me, threatening to crush my very soul. As I sat there, lost in thought, Claire walked in and sat beside me, her presence a comforting balm to my wounded heart. "Mom, you don't have to put up with this," she said, her voice filled with concern and determination. "You deserve so much better than what Dad has done to you." I looked at my daughter, tears welling up in my eyes. "I know, Claire, but it's not that simple. We've been married for 35 years. I never thought he would be capable of something like this." Claire took my hand in hers, squeezing it gently. "I understand, Mom, but you can't let him get away with it. You can't let him continue to hurt you like this." As we talked, Claire began to recount past incidents of Harold's erratic behavior. The late nights at the office, the secretive phone calls, the unexplained absences. Each revelation felt like a knife twisting in my gut, confirming the suspicions I had tried so hard to ignore. "Remember when he missed your birthday dinner last year?" Claire asked, her brow furrowed. "He claimed he had to work late, but I saw him at the mall with a woman I didn't recognize." My heart sank further as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The extent of Harold's deceit was far greater than I had initially realized. Blood began to boil within me as the anger and betrayal consumed my thoughts. "I can't believe I was so blind," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of sadness and rage. "How could I have let this go on for so long?" Claire wrapped her arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. "It's not your fault, Mom. Dad is the one who chose to betray your trust. You didn't do anything wrong." Her words provided a glimmer of comfort amidst the darkness that had engulfed my world. I knew I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for my children as well. They deserved a mother who fought for what was right, who refused to be a victim of her husband's selfish actions. "You're right, Claire," I said, my resolve strengthening with each passing moment. "I can't let your father's betrayal define me. I have to stand up for myself and for our family." Claire nodded, a fierce determination in her eyes. "We'll get through this together, Mom. I'll be by your side every step of the way." As we sat there, plotting our next move, I felt a sense of empowerment rising within me. I had spent too many years living in the shadow of Harold's lies and deceit. It was time to take back control of my life, to rebuild what he had so carelessly destroyed. "First things first," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. "I'm going to file for divorce. I won't let him continue to manipulate and control me." Claire smiled, pride shining in her eyes. "That's the mom I know and love, strong, resilient, and ready to fight for what she deserves." With my daughter's support and the truth finally exposed, I knew I had the strength to face the challenges that lay ahead. Harold's betrayal had shattered our family, but it had also awakened a fire within me, a determination to rise above the pain and forge a new path for myself. As Claire and I continued to talk, planning our next steps, I felt a sense of hope blossoming amidst the chaos. The road ahead would be difficult, but I knew I had the love and support of my children to guide me through the darkness. Harold's secrets had been brought to light, and now it was time for me to reclaim my life, to build a future free from the shadows of his betrayal. With each passing moment, my resolve grew stronger, fueled by the love and loyalty of my daughter. Together we would weather this storm and emerge stronger, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey of healing and empowerment had only just begun, but I knew I was no longer alone in this fight. Just as I thought the storm of Harold's betrayal couldn't get any worse, an unexpected visitor arrived at my doorstep. Beatrice, Harold's overbearing mother, barged into my home without so much as a hello, her face etched with disapproval and contempt. "You should have kept your family affairs in check, Ellen. It's all your fault Harold strayed," she said, her voice dripping with venom. I stood there, stunned by her audacity. How dare she come into my home and accuse me of being responsible for Harold's infidelity? Anger bubbled up inside me, threatening to spill over. "Excuse me, Beatrice, but I don't think you have any right to come here and blame me for your son's actions," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. Beatrice scoffed, her eyes narrowing. "Please, Ellen, if you had been a better wife, Harold wouldn't have had to seek comfort elsewhere. You've always been too focused on your own needs, neglecting your duties as a spouse." Her words cut deep, reopening wounds I thought had long since healed. Memories of the countless sacrifices I had made for our family, the years I had devoted to being a loving wife and mother, all came rushing back. "How dare you?" I said, my voice rising with each word. "I have given everything to this family, to Harold. I have been by his side through thick and thin, and this is how he repays me? By betraying our marriage vows and seeking solace in the arms of another woman?" Beatrice remained unmoved, her face a mask of cold indifference. "You have no one to blame but yourself, Ellen. If you had been more attentive, more understanding, none of this would have happened." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The audacity of this woman to come into my home and spew such vile accusations. It was as if she had completely disregarded the pain and heartbreak her son had inflicted upon me. "Get out of my house, Beatrice," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "I will not stand here and listen to you defend Harold's despicable actions. He made his choice, and now he must face the consequences." Beatrice's eyes flashed with anger, but she remained rooted in place. "You're making a mistake, Ellen. Harold is a good man, and you're throwing away a lifetime of marriage over a simple indiscretion." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head in disbelief. "A simple indiscretion? Is that what you call betraying your spouse, lying to your family, and destroying the trust that holds a marriage together?" The room fell silent, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Beatrice and I stood there, locked in a battle of wills, neither of us willing to back down. Finally, Beatrice spoke, her voice cold and unforgiving. "You mark my words, Ellen. You'll regret this decision. Harold is the best thing that ever happened to you, and you're throwing it all away." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. I stood there, trembling with a mixture of anger and exhaustion, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. But amidst the chaos and the pain, a newfound resolve began to take hold. Beatrice's visit had only strengthened my determination to break free from the toxic influence of Harold and his family. I refused to be a victim any longer, to be blamed for the actions of a man who had so carelessly thrown away our life together. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders as I prepared for the battle ahead. Harold and Beatrice may have thought they could break me, but they had underestimated the strength that lay within. I would fight for my dignity, for my right to a life free from betrayal and deceit. With each passing moment, my resolve grew stronger, fueled by the love and support of my children and the knowledge that I deserved better. I would not let Harold's betrayal define me, nor would I allow Beatrice's cruel words to shake my determination. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but I was ready to face whatever challenges lay in store. I had the truth on my side, and I would not rest until justice was served and my family was free from the shadows of Harold's betrayal. The confrontation with Beatrice had left me emotionally drained, but it had also ignited a fire within me. I knew I couldn't let Harold's betrayal continue to poison our family. It was time to take a stand, to put an end to the lies and deceit that had plagued our marriage for far too long. Late that night, I found myself in our bedroom, waiting for Harold to return home. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. When he finally walked through the door, I was ready, my resolve unwavering. "We need to talk, Harold," I said, my voice steady and firm. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. "Can't this wait until morning, Ellen? I'm exhausted." I shook my head, standing my ground. "No, it can't wait. I've had enough of your lies and betrayal. I know about the affair, and I won't tolerate it any longer." Harold's face paled, and for a moment I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by anger, his features twisting into a scowl. "You've crossed the line, Harold. It's over," I said, my voice rising with each word. "I want a divorce." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that sent chills down my spine. "You think you can just end our marriage, just like that? You're nothing without me, Ellen. You'll be lost without my support." I felt a surge of anger course through my veins, and I stepped forward, my eyes blazing with fury. "I am not nothing, Harold. I am a strong, capable woman who has given everything to this family, and I will not let you treat me like a doormat any longer." He moved towards me, his hand raised as if to strike me, but before he could make contact, Claire burst into the room, her eyes wide with fear and anger. "Don't you dare lay a hand on her, Dad," she shouted, placing herself between us. "Mom is right. You've crossed the line, and we won't stand for it anymore." Harold's face contorted with rage, and he lunged forward, trying to push past Claire. But she stood her ground, her eyes blazing with determination. "I'm moving in with Mom," she declared, her voice unwavering. "We're going to support each other through this, and you won't be able to hurt her anymore." Harold's eyes darted between us, realization dawning on his face. He knew he had lost, that his carefully constructed web of lies was crumbling around him. "You'll regret this," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "You'll both regret turning against me." With that, he stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Claire and I stood there, trembling with a mixture of fear and relief. We had done it. We had stood up to Harold, and we had won. But even as the adrenaline coursed through my veins, I knew that this was only the beginning. Harold would not go down without a fight, and we had to be prepared for whatever he might throw our way. Claire wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight. "We're in this together, Mom," she whispered, her voice filled with love and support. "We'll get through this, no matter what." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I knew that the road ahead would be difficult, that there would be challenges and obstacles at every turn. But with Claire by my side, I felt a newfound strength rising within me. We had taken the first step towards freedom, towards a life free from Harold's toxic influence, and we would not rest until we had achieved that goal, no matter the cost. As the night wore on, Claire and I sat together, planning our next move. We knew that we had to be strategic, that we had to gather evidence and build a case against Harold. But even as we plotted and schemed, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life, that I was no longer a prisoner of Harold's lies and deceit. The breaking point had been reached, and there was no turning back now. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but I knew that with the love and support of my daughter, I could face anything that came my way. As Claire and I settled into our new apartment, the weight of the past few weeks began to lift from my shoulders. We had taken the first step towards freedom, towards a life free from Harold's lies and deceit. But even as we unpacked our belongings and started to make this place our own, I knew that our journey was far from over. One evening, as we sat at the dinner table, Claire looked at me with a determined glint in her eye. "We're going to make sure he regrets every betrayal, Mom," she said, her voice filled with a quiet fury. I nodded, my own anger simmering just beneath the surface. "You're right, Claire. We can't let him get away with what he's done. Not just to me, but to our family, to the life we built together." We began to brainstorm, plotting our next move. We knew that we needed evidence, something concrete that would expose Harold's infidelity and deceitfulness to the world. "I've been thinking," Claire said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "What if we reached out to the other women Dad has been involved with? If we can get them to come forward to share their stories, it would be impossible for him to deny the truth." I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. "That's a brilliant idea, Claire. If we can show a pattern of behavior, a history of lies and betrayal, it will be much harder for him to wriggle out of the consequences." We spent the next few days reaching out to the women Harold had wronged, gathering their stories and their evidence. Each conversation left me feeling more empowered, more determined to see this through to the end. As we pieced together the puzzle of Harold's deceit, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. For too long, I had been living in the shadows of his lies, allowing his actions to dictate the course of my life. But now, with Claire by my side and the truth on our side, I knew that I had the strength to fight back. We compiled the evidence, creating a dossier that laid bare the extent of Harold's betrayals. Photographs, text messages, emails, all of it painted a picture of a man who had no regard for the sanctity of his marriage vows, who had no qualms about destroying the lives of those closest to him. As I flipped through the pages of the dossier, I felt a sense of empowerment wash over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own destiny, like I was no longer a prisoner of Harold's whims and desires. Claire placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, her eyes shining with pride. "You're so brave, Mom," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I know this hasn't been easy, but I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself, for refusing to be a victim any longer." I smiled, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you, Claire. Your support, your love, it's what's kept me going through all of this." We spent the rest of the evening planning our next move, discussing how we would confront Harold with the evidence we had gathered. We knew that it wouldn't be easy, that he would likely fight back with everything he had. But we also knew that we had the truth on our side, that we had the support of each other and the other women he had wronged. And with that knowledge, we felt an unshakable sense of resolve, a determination to see this through to the end. As the night wore on and we retired to our respective bedrooms, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be, like I was finally on the path towards the life I deserved. And with Claire by my side, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter what obstacles Harold might throw in our way, we would face them together, united in our quest for justice and our desire to rebuild our lives on our own terms. The day of reckoning had finally arrived. Claire and I had spent weeks gathering evidence, reaching out to the other women Harold had wronged, and preparing for this moment. As we walked into the local community center, where Harold was attending a charity function, I felt a sense of nervous anticipation thrumming through my veins. We had chosen this event carefully, knowing that it would be attended by many of the town's most influential people. Harold had always been so concerned with his reputation, with maintaining the facade of the perfect husband and father. But today, we would shatter that illusion, exposing the truth of his deceit and betrayal for all to see. As we entered the main hall, I spotted Harold across the room, schmoozing with a group of his colleagues. He looked so smug, so self-assured, as if he had no idea of the storm that was about to descend upon him. Claire squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with determination. "Are you ready, Mom?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, steeling myself for what was to come. "Let's do this," I said, my voice steady and resolute. We made our way to the front of the room, where a small stage had been set up for the evening's presentations. As we approached the microphone, I could feel the eyes of the crowd upon us, curious and expectant. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice ringing out clear and strong. "I know many of you are here to support a worthy cause, but I'm afraid I have some troubling news to share with you tonight." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. I could see Harold's face, his expression shifting from confusion to anger as he realized what was happening. "For years, my husband Harold has been living a double life," I continued, my voice unwavering. "He has been unfaithful to me, to our marriage, and to the vows we made to each other 35 years ago." A gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by a buzz of whispers and murmurs. I could see the shock and disbelief on the faces of those around us, the realization that the man they had thought they knew was not who he appeared to be. "But don't just take my word for it," I said, gesturing to Claire. "We have gathered evidence, testimonies from the women he has wronged, that paint a picture of a man who has no regard for the sanctity of marriage, who has no qualms about destroying the lives of those closest to him." Claire stepped forward, holding up the dossier we had compiled. "We have photographs, text messages, emails, all proving the extent of Harold's betrayal," she said, her voice ringing with righteous anger. "He has lied to us, to all of you, for years, and it's time for the truth to come out." I could see Harold's face turning red, his fists clenched at his sides. He started to move towards us, his eyes blazing with fury, but he was held back by a group of his colleagues, their faces etched with shock and disgust. "The truth always comes out, Harold," I said, my voice filled with a quiet triumph. "And now, everyone here knows the kind of man you really are." The room erupted into chaos, people shouting questions and accusations, demanding answers from Harold. But he stood there, frozen, his reputation crumbling around him like a house of cards. As Claire and I watched the scene unfold, I felt a sense of vindication wash over me. For so long I had suffered in silence, bearing the weight of Harold's betrayal on my shoulders. But now, the truth was out, and he would have to face the consequences of his actions. I knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome. But with Claire by my side and the support of the community behind us, I felt a renewed sense of strength and determination. This was my moment, my chance to reclaim my life and my dignity. And I would not let it slip away, not now, not ever again. As the dust settled in the wake of Harold's public exposure, Claire and I found ourselves in a new chapter of our lives. We had moved into a cozy new home, leaving behind the painful memories and toxic energy of the past. The sun streamed through the windows, bathing the room in a warm, inviting glow, a perfect reflection of the hope and possibility that now stretched out before us. Claire and I sat at the kitchen table, sipping our morning coffee and reveling in the peace and tranquility of our new surroundings. The weight of the past few months had lifted from our shoulders, replaced by a sense of liberation and empowerment that was both exhilarating and terrifying. "We're finally free, Mom," Claire said, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and excitement. "What do you want to do next?" I took a deep breath, considering her question. For so long, my life had been defined by Harold's betrayal, by the pain and heartbreak that had consumed me. But now, with the truth exposed and the community rallying behind us, I felt like I could finally breathe again, like I could finally start living life on my own terms. "I want to focus on myself," I said, my voice filled with a newfound sense of determination. "I want to rediscover who I am, what I want out of life. I've spent so many years living in the shadow of Harold's lies, putting his needs and desires before my own. But now it's time for me to put myself first." Claire reached across the table, squeezing my hand in a gesture of support and understanding. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Mom. You deserve to be happy, to pursue your own dreams and passions." We spent the rest of the morning brainstorming ideas, dreaming up plans for the future. I talked about taking a painting class, something I had always wanted to do, but had never found the time for. Claire suggested we take a trip together, maybe to the beach or the mountains, somewhere we could relax and recharge. As we talked and laughed, I felt a sense of joy and contentment that I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be, surrounded by love and support, free from the chains of the past. Of course, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges and obstacles to overcome, moments of doubt and uncertainty. But with Claire by my side and a newfound sense of purpose in my heart, I knew that I could face whatever lay ahead with courage and resilience. In the days and weeks that followed, Claire and I threw ourselves into our new lives with gusto. We explored our new neighborhood, trying out local restaurants and shops, meeting new people, and making new friends. I signed up for that painting class, discovering a hidden talent and passion that I never knew I possessed. And through it all, we leaned on each other for support and encouragement, celebrating each other's successes and picking each other up when we stumbled. The bond between us had always been strong, but now it felt unbreakable, forged in the fires of adversity and tempered by the love and loyalty that had seen us through the darkest of times. As I looked around our cozy new home, filled with the laughter and warmth of my daughter, I felt a sense of gratitude and wonder wash over me. I had lost so much, endured so much pain and heartbreak, but in the end I had gained something far more precious. A second chance at life, an opportunity to start anew and build a future filled with joy, love, and purpose. And as the sun set on another day, casting a golden glow across the horizon, I knew that no matter what the future held, I would face it with my head held high and my heart full of hope. For the first time in my life, I was truly free, and that was a gift beyond measure.